Do not answer that yet. Whatever opened in front of you in the last few days, the door, the offer, the message, the person, the number that finally moved in the right direction, heaven is asking you to hold completely still before you walk through it. You are not hearing this by accident, and you did not arrive at this moment by chance. Your spirit recognized the signal before your mind could explain it, and that is exactly why you are still here instead of scrolling past. This is a setup, and the mistake heaven is warning you away from tonight is not a moral one. It is a recognition one. This is sudden protection. This is divine interruption. This is heaven stepping between you and a yes that would have quietly cost you the very thing you have been praying for. That pressure sitting on the top of your chest, that exhaustion behind your eyes that sleep has stopped repairing, and that strange sense that several people have started watching your life more closely than they used to. Do not let any of it pull you into fear. None of those three things are symptoms of failure. They are symptoms of proximity. Maybe the last 72 hours have felt unusually loud on the inside and unusually quiet on the outside. Perhaps someone who ignored you for years suddenly reappeared with a warmth you did not expect. Maybe a door you had stopped knocking on opened by itself. Maybe money moved. Maybe an offer arrived. Maybe a person said the exact sentence you have been waiting most of your adult life to hear. Or maybe you have been sitting alone at 3 in the morning with your phone face down on your knee, wondering why something that should feel like an answered prayer keeps producing a knot in your stomach instead of peace. Hear this clearly, because it is the sentence this entire message exists to place in your hands. You are not being trapped, you are being set apart. And the moment you can tell the counterfeit from the calling, no open door can ever cost you again. Something has been working overtime around your life this week, and I want you to understand precisely why. It is not working to hurt you. It already tried that, and it did not succeed. You survived the years it spent trying to break you, so it changed strategy. It is no longer attempting to stop you, it is attempting to hurry you. Because whatever cannot be stopped can still be traded. And a person who has been exhausted long enough, overlooked long enough, and hungry long enough will trade a promise for a preview and call it faith. You are not becoming dangerous because you finally got what you wanted. You are becoming dangerous because you learned how to wait without becoming bitter, and there is no counterfeit for that. Within the next 24 hours, the pressure to decide, the fear that this will never come around again, and the voice telling you that hesitation is the same thing as unbelief can begin to lose their grip on you. Not because the situation changes, because you stop reading it with the wrong instrument. You chose to stay in the room when leaving would have been easier. You chose silence when defending yourself would have felt so much better. You chose to keep praying about a thing that every reasonable person in your life told you to release 2 years ago. Think back to that one moment earlier this week when everything in you wanted to send the message, sign the thing, make the call, say the yes, and something stopped your hand for reasons you could not have put into a single sentence if somebody had asked you to. You thought that hesitation was fear. You assumed it was your old wound making you small again. The same self-sabotage you have been apologizing for since you were young. It was not. That hesitation was the opening line of a warning being delivered to you in the only language fast enough to reach you before your hand moved. The algorithm did not bring you here. Something older and far more precise than any system ever built by human hands placed this in front of you tonight, and your awareness chose to stay. So stay with me all the way to the end. Because in the next stretch of this message, I am going to hand you 3 signatures that expose a counterfeit before it costs you anything. Walk you through exactly where in your body a warning lands first, and why it lands there and nowhere else. And give you the one reason your discernment went quiet in the first place. That last part is the piece almost nobody will say out loud, and it is the reason sincere people get caught far more often than careless ones. Do not leave this moment unchanged. If you walk away now, you go back into the same room, holding the same offer, carrying the same 3 days of pressure on your shoulders, and you make the decision alone, with the same instrument that has been misreading things for a while. If you stay, you make it with your eyes open and your hands steady, I have sat exactly where you are sitting. Years ago, something arrived in my life carrying every mark of an answered prayer. The timing was uncanny. The people were kind. The provision was real, and it was immediate, and I had been tired for so long that immediate felt like confirmation. I remember telling a friend that God had finally moved. 11 months later, I was still unwinding the consequences of that, yes, and the thing I had actually been praying for came knocking, while both of my hands were completely full. I could not receive it, not because I was unworthy, because I was occupied. There is a specific lie being whispered over you tonight, and I want to name it out loud so it loses its costume. The lie sounds like this: if you do not take this now, nothing else is coming. You are running out of road. This is what people like you get, and people like you do not get to be picky. As it is written in Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 3, the vision is appointed for a set time, and though it tarries, it does not lie. That appointed time is not someday, it is not next year. It is not a polite religious word for eventually. It is the reason something inside you refused to sign yet, even while your mouth was already forming the yes. Chosen one. Your discernment in this season will determine whether you walk into the real thing or into an unnecessary delay wearing the clothing of the real thing. And this is not a warning designed to frighten you. It is a truth designed to prepare you, because heaven does not interrupt people it has given up on. What you are feeling right now is not emotional hype, not imagination, and not coincidence. That heaviness sitting underneath your excitement, that pressure that arrives at 3 in the morning when the house is finally quiet and the version of the story you tell everybody else stops working, that is your spirit reading a document your mind has not yet been given clearance to see. One decision, one reaction, one moment of patience, or one moment of hurry can determine the direction of your entire next season. Not because God is waiting for you to slip, because doors have consequences, and some doors lock behind you. And here is where heaven is leaning in tonight. In some places, it is no longer whispering, "No, not this, not now, do not move." Chosen one, let that settle before we take one more step, because you need to understand something about the nature of what you are being protected from, and once you see it, it will reorganize how you interpret every good thing that has ever gone wrong in your life. A trap that looks like a trap has never caught anything in the entire history of the world. Not once. That is simply not how a trap functions. No hunter ever captured a bird by setting out a cage with a warning painted on the side of it. The whole architecture of a snare depends on the creature walking toward it willingly, and the only way any creature walks toward something willingly is if that something resembles the exact thing it has been searching for. In the Hebrew of the older scriptures, there is a specific word for this. The word is pach. It does not mean a pit, and it does not mean a wall. It means a spring-loaded bird snare, a thin plate hidden beneath a scattering of grain, invisible from above, harmless in appearance, and completely dependent on bait. That word shows up when the writers describe the schemes set against the righteous, and the choice of word is not decorative, it is diagnostic. A pach has 3 properties, and I want you to hold all 3 because everything else in this message is built on top of them. It is always disguised as provision. It is always placed on a path the traveler was already walking. And it is always set in a location where something valuable is known to pass. Sit with that 3rd property for a moment. Nobody sets a snare in an empty field. Nobody wastes good bait on ground where nothing of worth has ever walked. The presence of a trap in your life is not evidence that you are cursed. It is evidence that something of enormous value has been observed, moving through that exact stretch of road, and the one who set it is not confused about what you are carrying, even during the seasons when you are. That is the first thing I need you to take from tonight, and I want you to take it before we get to anything practical. The adversary of your life has never once wasted resources on a person going nowhere. Look at the sheer amount of effort that has been spent on you. Look at the timing of the interruptions. Look at how often things have come apart at the precise moment they were about to come together. That is not the pattern of a forgotten person. That is the pattern of a person being intercepted. Chosen one, hear the difference between those two words, because a great many people spend their whole lives grieving the wrong one. To be forgotten means nobody is paying attention. To be intercepted means somebody is paying extremely close attention. You have been reading interception as abandonment, and that single misreading has cost you more confidence than any actual failure ever did. Now let me show you where the ancient snare shows up in a modern life, because the grain is not grain anymore. Sometimes the bait is a job that pays just enough to end the bill anxiety that has been sitting on your chest since the spring, and it arrives in the exact week the account balance made you feel small in front of your own children. Sometimes the bait is a person who says the words the last person could never say, and they say them early, and they say them often, and they say them with your name attached. Sometimes the bait is a partnership, an invitation, a platform, a room full of people who finally treat you like you are somebody. And here is the part that stings. None of those things are evil in themselves. A job is not evil. Love is not evil. Money is not evil. Recognition after a long hidden season is not evil, which is exactly why the snare works at all. The bait is never poison. The bait is always food. The problem was never the grain. The problem was the plate underneath it. So if the bait is genuinely good, and your desire for it is entirely legitimate, and the prayer you prayed for it was completely sincere, then how is a person supposed to tell the difference before it is too late? That question is the reason this message exists, and I intend to answer it completely before we are finished. But before I do, I have to take something off your shoulders, because nobody learns discernment while they are busy defending themselves. You did not get caught in the past because you were foolish. Let me say that again, slowly, because I know how long you have been carrying the other version of it. You did not get caught because you were foolish, gullible, naive, or too soft-hearted for this world. You got caught because the thing that caught you was engineered to be indistinguishable from the thing you were promised. Being deceived by an excellent forgery is not a character flaw. It is a resolution problem, and resolution can be restored. That is the good news buried inside this warning, and we will get there together. Chosen one, before we continue deeper, pause here. Let this settle in your spirit rather than in your analysis. You are not being held back. You are being protected. Now I want you to run a quiet inventory with me, because most people cannot tell whether they are standing near a snare until somebody hands them the list of what a snare does to a person before it closes. It starts in the body. Your sleep changes shape. Not insomnia exactly, more like waking at a consistent hour with your jaw already tight, your mind already 3 arguments deep in a conversation you have not had yet. Your appetite becomes strange around this specific subject. Your shoulders live somewhere near your ears. And when someone asks you how the new thing is going, you smile and say, "Wonderful," and something in your throat disagrees with your mouth. Then it moves into the emotions. You notice you have started rehearsing explanations, rehearsing defenses, rehearsing how you will describe this decision to the one person whose opinion you respect most. Genuine peace does not require rehearsal. When something is truly of God, you do not have to build a legal case for it in the shower. Then it enters your sleeping mind. The dreams get oddly specific: locked rooms, missed flights, being handed keys that do not fit, standing in a house that is beautiful and empty, and somehow not yours. Chosen one, do not let anybody talk you out of your dreams during a decision season. The sleeping mind is where a warning goes when the waking mind has stopped taking calls. And finally, it shows up on the outside. The people whose discernment you have trusted for a decade go quiet, not hostile, quiet. They congratulate you with 2 fewer sentences than usual. Doors that should be easy develop friction. Details that should be simple keep needing to be repeated. And there is always a reason to hurry. If more than 2 of those are true in your life this week, you are not paranoid and you are not ungrateful. You are perceptive and you are standing closer to a hinge in your destiny than you have stood in years. Because a trap is only ever set at a place worth guarding. And what heaven is guarding tonight is not your comfort, it is your inheritance. Chosen one, I want to name something before we go further, because if I do not name it, it will keep operating underneath everything else you hear tonight. You have been taught, somewhere along the way, that a good God only warns you about bad things, that if a thing is wholesome, decent, legal, kind, and answers a real need, then it must have come from Him. That instinct feels like faith, and it is actually the largest unguarded door in the modern spiritual life. Because the adversary lost the ability to tempt you with obvious ruin a long time ago, you are not going to be undone by something shameful. You outgrew that category of danger during the years nobody was watching you grow. So the strategy adapted. What is aimed at you now is not sin, it is substitution. Substitution is the whole game, not the destruction of the promise, which is beyond its authority anyway. The substitution of the promise with something that resembles it closely enough to occupy the same space in your life. Because a person can only be married to one thing at a time. A person can only sign one contract for the same hours. A person can only build on one plot of land. And that is why heaven interrupts, not to withhold, to keep the space clear. This is not a setup against you. This is heaven setting you apart. Chosen one, as we move deeper into this revelation, I need you to understand something that will change the way you read this entire season of your life. Now I want to pause and hold something in front of you before we continue, because it belongs here even though it will make more sense later than it does right now. Over the past few years, something was documented in research laboratories that most people who care about the things we are discussing tonight have never been told about. Not because it contradicts anything sacred, because it came from a direction almost nobody in our world is watching. It explains something that spiritually sensitive people have felt for decades and have never once been able to name, and it traces back to work that won one of the highest honors in science. I am going to tell you what they found later in this message. For right now, hold one question in your hands. What if the reason your inner clarity has been dimming is not age, and not a lack of discipline, and not a failure of faith? What if something was taken from you? Hold that. Do not answer it yet. We will come back for it. Because first you need the mechanism, and the mechanism begins with the single most uncomfortable sentence in this entire message. The counterfeit is always built from your prayer. Not from your weakness, not from your appetite, from your prayer. Think about what a forgery actually requires. A forger cannot produce a convincing signature without first studying the real one at length. A counterfeit note is not invented, it is copied. And the closer the copy, the more study went into the original. So, when something arrives in your life that matches your prayer with unusual precision, that precision is not automatically evidence of divine authorship. Precision is evidence of study. And you have been praying out loud, in the car, in the shower, in the kitchen at midnight for years. We call this the counterfeit yes. The counterfeit yes is not a temptation to do wrong. It is an invitation to receive the right thing from the wrong hand, at the wrong hour, in the wrong measure. It is your prayer answered by an entity that does not have the authority to answer it, which means the answer comes without the provision that was supposed to come with it. And that last part is where the real damage lives. Chosen one, listen carefully. Everything that comes from God arrives with its own supply. The calling comes with the grace to carry it. The child comes with the patience. The platform comes with the character to survive standing on it. The house comes with the peace to sleep in it. That is what people mean when they say the blessing of the Lord adds no sorrow. It is not a poetic sentiment, it is a supply chain statement. The counterfeit arrives naked. It looks the same on the outside and it comes with nothing attached to it. The money without the wisdom to steward it. The relationship without the capacity to sustain it. The opportunity without the covering to protect you inside it. The elevation without the foundation underneath it. It gives you the shape of the answer and withholds every resource that made the answer survivable. That is why some people receive the exact thing they prayed for and are destroyed by it. Not because God is cruel, because they received the shape from a hand that had no supply. Let me show you this in the oldest story we have about it. A man was promised a son, not a metaphorical son, a specific child, from whom a specific lineage would come, spoken over him by God directly. And then nothing happened. For years, long enough that the promise stopped feeling like a promise and started feeling like a private embarrassment he had to explain to his wife every anniversary. So they solved it, not sinfully in the eyes of their culture, practically, reasonably. Within the accepted customs of their time, they arranged a son through Hagar, and a boy named Ishmael was born. And for 13 years that child was treated as the fulfillment. 13 years, chosen one. That is not a moment of weakness. That is more than a decade of raising the substitution and calling it the promise. And Ishmael was not evil. That is the part people miss when they teach this story badly. He was a boy. He was loved. God himself blessed him. The problem was never that Ishmael was bad. The problem was that Ishmael occupied the space that Isaac was coming into, and the presence of the substitution made the arrival of the real thing infinitely more painful than it ever needed to be. Every counterfeit you accept has to be dismantled later, and you are usually the one holding the hammer. That is the cost nobody tells you about. It is not that the counterfeit destroys you outright. It is that saying yes to it converts your future into cleanup. The years you were supposed to spend building, you spend unwinding. The energy that was allocated for the assignment gets spent on the exit. Chosen one. If you have ever wondered why you feel so far behind people who are objectively less gifted than you are, this is very often the answer. You are not slower. You have been paying off a substitution. And I want you to hear the compassion inside this, because I am not describing a failure of yours. I am describing what happens to people who wait a long time. Waiting produces a specific vulnerability, and it is not weakness. It is fatigue of certainty. After enough years, you stop asking whether a thing is the promise, and you start asking whether you can afford to keep waiting for one. That shift in the question is where the snare gets its opening. Now let me put a second picture in your hands, because we are going to look at this from several angles before the night is over, and each angle shows you something the previous one could not. Imagine you have been given a key. It was pressed into your palm a long time ago by someone who loved you, with instructions that there was a door somewhere ahead that it would open. You have carried that key through every season, through the years nobody believed you, through the job that ended badly, through the season your family stopped asking what you were working on. That key has been in your pocket the whole time, and some nights it is the only evidence you have that the promise was ever made. Now imagine somebody hands you a second key. It looks almost identical, same weight, same metal, and it fits a door that is right here, right now, unlocked in front of you tonight, no waiting required. Here is the entire question of this message. Not whether the second door is a nice door, it might be a beautiful door. The question is, what happens to the first key once you walk through the second one? Because a key is not a possession. A key is a relationship between you and a specific door, and people do not usually lose their key. They just walk far enough away from the door it was cut for that the key becomes decorative. That is how most callings die. Not in rebellion, in relocation. Chosen one. The counterfeit yes never asks you to throw the key away. It only asks you to walk. Let me give you something you can act on tonight, because I do not believe in warnings that leave people frightened and empty-handed. Take whatever is in front of you right now and ask it one question. What does this require me to stop doing? Not what does it give me? Everything gives you something. What does it require me to stop? Because a genuine assignment from God will always ask you to stop things too. It will ask you to stop wasting hours. It will ask you to stop performing for people who are never going to clap. But it will not ask you to stop the thing you were made for. It will not ask you to stop the prayer. It will not ask you to abandon the door your key was cut for. The counterfeit always asks for the key, never immediately, and never in those words. It asks for your Saturdays first, then your margin, then the specific hours in which the real thing was supposed to be built. And it does all of that while paying you, which is why it takes so long for anybody to notice. Sit with that question for a minute after this message ends. What does this require me to stop doing? And then be honest about whether the thing it wants you to stop is a habit or a horizon. If this is already landing somewhere specific in your life, and I suspect it is, write the word understood in the comments below. Not for me, for you. Something happens to a truth when a person is willing to put their name next to it, and I want you to be able to look back at your own handwriting when the pressure gets loud again next week. Now let me anticipate the objection that is forming in you, because it is a good objection and it deserves a real answer. You are thinking, if the counterfeit looks exactly like the real thing and the bait is genuinely good and the timing is genuinely uncanny, then this is unfair. How is anybody supposed to live like this? Am I now expected to suspect every good thing that ever happens to me? Is that faith? Or is that just a spiritual way of being afraid all the time? I want to answer that directly, because there is a version of this teaching that has ruined people, and I refuse to hand it to you. No, you are not being asked to suspect everything. Suspicion is not discernment. Suspicion is what discernment gets replaced with when a person has been hurt and never healed. A suspicious person is not protected. A suspicious person is simply unable to receive, which means the enemy achieved the same outcome by a different road. If you cannot say yes to anything, you are just as trapped as the person who says yes to everything. The snare does not care which side of the road you fall on. What you are being handed tonight is not suspicion, it is resolution. The ability to look at two things that appear identical and see the seam. And here is what I need you to know before we go on. That ability is not a personality trait. Some people are not born with it, while others are left out. It is a faculty. It can be dulled, it can be interfered with, and it can be restored, which is why the second half of this message is not about the trap at all. It is about the instrument that was designed to detect it. Because, chosen one, hear this. The reason you are in danger tonight is not that the enemy got smarter, it is that your instrument got quieter. And nobody ever told you that the instrument was even a thing that could be repaired. There is also something else happening beneath the surface of this season, and you can feel it if you slow down long enough to notice. Every single person who has ever been trapped by a counterfeit had a moment. One moment, usually brief, usually early, where they knew, not with evidence, with that quiet interior know that arrives before the reasons do. And in almost every case, the moment was overridden by a sentence that sounded very spiritual. I do not want to be negative. I should be grateful. God helps those who help themselves. Maybe this is my faith being tested, and I am supposed to be brave. What if I am the problem? Chosen one, write this down somewhere you will see it. Heaven has never once needed you to override your own peace in order to obey. Not once. There is no story in any sacred text where God asked a person to trample their own inner witness in order to walk into a blessing. He asked people to walk into fear. He never asked them to walk into wrongness. Fear says, I am afraid of what is on the other side of this door. Wrongness says something about this door is not what it claims to be. Those two feel similar in the chest, and they are completely different instruments. And by the end of this message, you will never confuse them again. This is not a setup against you. This is heaven setting you apart. Chosen one, there is a second face of this that I have to show you, and it is the one that separates the people who eventually recover from the people who spend the rest of their lives smaller than they were made to be. The counterfeit does not only imitate your promise, it imitates your confirmation. You know how you receive confirmation. Everyone has a personal grammar with heaven. For some people, it is a number that keeps appearing. For some, it is a song arriving at an impossible moment. For some, it is a stranger saying a sentence they had no way of knowing. For some, it is a scripture opening under their thumb. And whatever your grammar is, the adversary has been reading it for as long as you have been using it. So when the substitution arrives, it does not arrive quietly. It arrives with signs. It arrives with coincidences, stacked so high that doubting it feels like ingratitude. And that stack of signs is the single most effective part of the entire mechanism because it converts your own spiritual history into pressure. Now hear me carefully, because I am not telling you that signs are meaningless, and I am not telling you to stop noticing them. I am telling you what a sign actually is. A sign is a road marker. It tells you where you are. It has never once told you what to do at the intersection. People who navigate by signs alone end up in beautiful places they were never assigned to. The test of a confirmation is not whether it is impressive, it is whether it survives your peace. If a confirmation is real, it will still be there after 3 days of silence. It will still be there after you stop looking for it. It will still be there when you are calm. A manufactured confirmation always requires momentum to stay convincing. Take away the urgency, and it starts to look thin. That is why heaven so often says wait rather than no. Waiting is not punishment. Waiting is a laboratory. Waiting is the only environment in which the difference between a real signal and an imitation becomes visible, because the imitation cannot survive the still air. Let me hand you the second tool of the night, and this one costs you nothing but 3 days. Whatever is in front of you, apply what I want to call the still air test. Remove urgency from the situation entirely, in your imagination first. Ask yourself one question. If I could have this exact same thing, unchanged, in 90 days instead of tonight, would I still want it? Watch what happens inside you when you ask that, because a genuine assignment will survive the question comfortably. It might disappoint you to wait, but it will not panic. The value does not evaporate. The desire remains recognizable. A counterfeit reacts differently, and the reaction is unmistakable once you have seen it once. There is a flare of something that is not disappointment. It is closer to dread, and underneath the dread, there is a very quiet, very fast argument forming about why 90 days is impossible, why this is different, why the circumstances would never allow it. Chosen one, that argument is the trap talking, not the person offering it, the arrangement itself. Because a snare only functions while the bird is moving. Stillness is the enemy of every snare that has ever been made, which is why the pressure to move is never optional and never absent. And I want you to notice something about your own history right now, tonight, while this is fresh. Every single thing in your life that eventually hurt you had a hurry attached to it. Go back and check. Not one of them was comfortable waiting. Not one of them said, take your time and mean it. There was always a window, an offer expiring, a person who could not be kept waiting, a season that would supposedly close. And every single thing that has genuinely blessed your life was patient with you. It waited while you doubted it. It waited while you were unready. It waited while you tested it. It is still waiting for you tonight, which is precisely why heaven can afford to interrupt your evening and tell you not to move. What is truly yours cannot be lost by hesitation. It can only be delayed by substitution. Chosen one, as we enter this next flow of revelation, let the weight of what heaven is showing you settle deeply into your spirit before you carry it anywhere else. Because we have to talk about hurry now, and hurry is the most misunderstood force in the spiritual life. Most people believe the opposite of faith is doubt. It is not. A person can doubt and still stand still long enough for the truth to arrive. The opposite of faith is hurry, because hurry is the decision to act before you have heard, dressed up as courage. And I want to give this thing a name, so you can see it coming from a distance for the rest of your life. We call it the hurry signature. The hurry signature is the residue that every counterfeit leaves on a situation, and it is detectable long before the consequences are. It does not always sound like pressure. It is much more sophisticated than that. It usually sounds like opportunity, and it usually arrives wearing the vocabulary of your own faith. Sometimes it says, this is a now word. Sometimes it says, favor moves fast. Sometimes it says, the door is only open for a season, and you have to be ready. Sometimes it does not say anything at all. It simply arranges the circumstances so that waiting feels like the most irresponsible thing a reasonable adult could possibly do. But here is the mechanism underneath all of it. And once you understand the mechanism, you will never again be moved by the vocabulary. Hurry exists to prevent inquiry. That is its entire function, not to make you excited, to make you unable to check. Every con in the history of human beings, spiritual or financial or romantic, has the same load-bearing wall, and it is the compression of time. because a lie survives only in the space between the offer and the examination. Close that space, and the lie is safe. Open it, and the lie dies of exposure. So the offer must always arrive with a clock attached, and the clock must always be presented as a feature of the opportunity rather than as a property of the deception. Chosen one, what is genuinely yours has been yours since before you had a name. It is not going to be reassigned because you took 3 days to pray. Let me tell you about a ship. There was a man who received a clear instruction and did not want it. The assignment pointed east, toward a city he despised, toward people he did not believe deserved mercy. So he went down to the port at Joppa to go the other direction, and here is the detail that almost everyone reads past. There was a ship there, a ship going to Tarshish, in port, loading, at the exact hour he arrived, and he had the fare. The scripture says plainly that he paid it. He did not have to wait a week. He did not have to negotiate. He did not have to find an unusual route or convince anybody of anything. The single most disobedient decision of his life was met with immediate, seamless, frictionless cooperation from his circumstances. Sit with that, because it dismantles something you were taught in a well-meaning room a long time ago. You were taught that when something flows easily, it is God. You were taught that if the door opened, God opened it. You were taught to look for peace as the absence of resistance. But the ship to Tarshish was in port, and the fare was affordable, and the entire arrangement was a descent. The text keeps using the same word for what he did. He went down to Joppa. He went down into the ship. He went down into the lowest part of the vessel. Down, down, down. In a season where everything on the surface was cooperating beautifully. Chosen one, cooperation is not confirmation. Circumstances are not moral. They are simply available. And there is always a ship going somewhere. And there is very often just enough money in your account to pay the fare. And neither of those facts has ever proven a single thing about whether you were supposed to board. I need you to hear the tenderness in this and not only the warning. Because you have blamed yourself for years for decisions that fell apart, and you have carried a private verdict that says you must have missed God somewhere. Sometimes the verdict was fair, but very often what actually happened was that you were taught to navigate by open doors, and open doors are the cheapest thing in the entire spiritual world. Anyone can open a door. The question was never whether the door opened. The question was who opened it, and what is standing behind it, and why now. Let me show you a second man from an older story who made the same mistake with better manners. Two families had grown too large to share the same land, and an older man gave a younger one the first choice of territory. That is an act of enormous generosity, by the way. The one with the authority let the one without it choose first. And the younger man lifted up his eyes and looked, and he saw that the plain of Jordan was well watered everywhere, like a garden, and he chose it. Every single word in that description is about the eyes. He lifted his eyes, he looked, he saw, he chose. There is no moment in the account where he asks a question of anybody, including God. The land was genuinely good. That is not in dispute. It was the most fertile ground available, and any agricultural expert of the era would have made the same recommendation. The problem was never the quality of the soil. The problem was the address of the city sitting in the middle of it, and the fact that the choice was made by a man using only the instrument of his eyes at a moment when he had every opportunity to use a better one. He did not lose everything at once. That is important. It took years. He prospered there for a while. He became a man of standing in that city. The consequences of choosing by sight arrived slowly enough that he never associated them with the choice. Chosen one, that is how substitution collects. Never at the moment of purchase, always later, in installments, when the connection is hard to see. Now let me put this in your hands as something you can actually use, because I promised you tools and not just diagnoses. Here is how to read the hurry signature in real life this week. Watch what happens to the offer when you introduce a delay you did not have to justify. Do not explain yourself. Do not build a case. Simply say some version of, "I need a few days with this," and then watch the temperature of the room. Anything that is truly from God has room in it for you to breathe. A real assignment does not resent your process. The people attached to a genuine door will say, take all the time you need, and they will mean it, because they are not depending on your speed for the thing to work. But a substitution reveals itself immediately when time is introduced. There will be a shift. It might be very small, a tightness in the reply, a subtle repositioning where suddenly you are the difficult one, a gentle implication that other people are ready even if you are not, a reframe where your caution becomes a character issue. Chosen one, that shift is the plate under the grain, and you just watched it move. And I want to warn you about something specific, because this is where good-hearted people get taken. The pressure will very rarely come from an obvious villain. It will usually come from someone who genuinely likes you, who genuinely believes in the thing, and who is genuinely in a hurry themselves. Decent people transmit urgency they did not create. That is what makes it so hard to see. You keep looking for bad intentions and finding none, and you conclude that the arrangement must therefore be safe. Intentions are not the test. Structure is the test. Ask what the arrangement needs from you in order to function, and if what it needs most is your speed, you have your answer regardless of how kind everybody involved happens to be. Before we continue deeper, pause here for a moment. Take one breath that reaches lower than your chest. Let your shoulders come down from where they have been living. You are not being held back. You are being kept. I want to tell you about a season in my own life where I learned this in the most expensive way available. There was a year when three things arrived at once. An offer that solved a financial problem I had been quietly bleeding from for 2 years. A relationship that repaired an old ache I had stopped admitting to anyone. And an invitation into a room I had wanted to be in since I was young. All three inside of about 6 weeks. And every part of me interpreted the density as divine. That is the word I used with people. God is moving so fast right now, because when you have been in a dry place long enough, abundance itself feels like proof, and the arrival of several good things at once feels mathematically impossible to be anything but heaven. Here is what I did not know then, and what I want you to have tonight without paying for it the way I did. Density is a strategy. When several good things arrive simultaneously, a human being loses the ability to examine any of them properly. You cannot inspect 3 offers at once. You can only celebrate. 2 of those 3 things were real. 1 of them was not. And because I received all 3 with the same posture, I did not discover which was which until the counterfeit had already reorganized my calendar, my finances, and eventually my sense of who I was. Chosen one, if several doors have opened around you at once in this season, that is not automatically a reason to worry. But it is a reason to slow down, because the volume itself is doing something to your judgment right now that you cannot feel while it is happening. Take them one at a time. Ask the same 3 questions of each one. What does this require me to stop doing? Would I still want this in 90 days? And who is in a hurry here, and why? Those 3 questions are free, and they would have saved me an entire year of my life. This is not a setup against you. This is heaven setting you apart. Chosen one, there is a deeper layer to what I just described, and you can feel it if you slow your spirit down long enough to look underneath the surface of your own week. Hurry does not only prevent inquiry, hurry counterfeits obedience. That is the sentence that took me the longest to understand, and it is the one that protects the most, because the person listening to this message is not lazy and is not passive. You are the kind of person who moves when God speaks. You have built your entire identity around being responsive. When you hear something, you act, and you have watched other people miss things because they hesitated, and you promised yourself you would never be that person. And the adversary knows that about you, so it does not try to make you disobedient. It tries to make you fast. Because a fast yes feels exactly like an obedient yes from the inside. The chest reaction is identical. The sense of purpose is identical. The willingness to sacrifice is identical. The only difference between the two is whether you heard something first, and hurry is specifically engineered to remove that step while leaving every other part of the experience intact. Chosen one, obedience is a response. Hurry is a reflex. One requires a voice, the other only requires a stimulus. And this is why so many of the most sincere, most surrendered, most spiritually committed people you know have the most damaged histories. It is not because their faith was weak. It is because their reflex was strong and nobody ever taught them the difference. Let me show you what it looks like to have this repaired, because I do not want you to walk out of tonight only knowing what is wrong. Picture yourself 6 months from now, sitting somewhere ordinary, your kitchen table maybe, early, before the house wakes up, and something comes across your phone, an offer, a door, the kind of thing that used to send your whole nervous system into a spin, and you notice something new. You read it, and your body does not move. There is no flare of panic dressed as excitement. There is no immediate mental rehearsal of how you will explain this to your family. There is just a clean, unhurried interest and a quiet internal note that says, I will look at this properly on Thursday. That is what a restored instrument feels like. It does not feel like fireworks. It feels like the absence of noise. And from that quiet place, you can see the seam on things that used to be invisible to you. Now go further out with me. See the version of your finances that comes from that quiet. Not a fantasy, something specific. See the month where the bill that used to make your stomach drop simply gets paid without drama, because the last 3 decisions you made were all made from a clear mind instead of a pressured one. See the work you do actually compounding, because you finally stopped starting over every 18 months in the wreckage of another substitution. Chosen one. Most people do not have a money problem. They have an accumulated redirection problem. Every counterfeit yes resets the clock. The reason so many gifted people are broke at 50 is not lack of talent and not lack of favor. It is that they have never been allowed to finish anything because something good and wrong kept arriving right before completion. And I want you to see what happens when that pattern stops. See yourself finishing something. See the 2nd year of the same work. See the 3rd. See the way opportunity behaves differently around a person who is already standing somewhere solid, because opportunity is drawn to gravity, and gravity is built by staying. That is not a prosperity promise. I am not going to tell you a number, and I am not going to tell you a date. I am telling you a mechanism, and mechanisms are more valuable than promises because you can operate them. Now let me hand you something for your body, because everything we have discussed tonight lands there first, and your body has been trying to tell you for weeks. Wherever you are, let your hands rest open instead of closed. You do not need to do anything spiritual with them, just open. Now bring your attention to the area just under your collarbone, the place where the breath usually stops when a person is bracing. Breathe once into that specific place and notice what is already there. For some of you, there is a tightness that has been there so long you had stopped classifying it as a feeling. For some of you, there is a flutter. For some of you, there is a heaviness that sits like a coat you forgot you were wearing indoors. Do not try to remove it. That is not what this is for. Simply notice it, and then notice something else. Notice that it changes when you think about the specific thing that is in front of you right now. Bring the offer, the door, the person, the decision into your mind, and watch what happens under your collarbone. Chosen one, whatever just happened in your body was information, not emotion, information. And in a few minutes, I am going to teach you exactly how to read it, because it is the single most underused instrument you own. But first, I have to tell you about a man who was so committed to a direction that God had to use an animal to stop him, and about the strangest detail in that entire account, which is not the talking donkey. There was a man named Balaam who had a reputation. When he blessed, things flourished. When he cursed, things withered. And a king, who was terrified of a migrating nation, sent messengers with money to hire him to speak against them. Balaam did the right thing the first time. He asked. He inquired. He received a clear answer, and the answer was, do not go with them. And he sent the messengers home. Then the king sent a second delegation. More honorable princes this time. More money, more flattery. And this is where the account becomes uncomfortably close to your life, chosen one, Because Balaam did not rebel. He went back and asked again. He asked again about a matter that had already been settled. That is the moment, not the money, not the sorcery. The second inquiry about a closed subject, made by a man who was hoping for a different answer while presenting himself as devout. And God let him go. That is the part that should make every one of us go quiet. Permission was granted, and permission was not approval. He was allowed to saddle his donkey and take the road, and by every external measure, the trip was authorized. And then, an angel with a drawn sword stood in the path, invisible to the prophet and completely visible to the animal. 3 times the donkey stopped. Once she turned into a field, once she crushed his foot against a wall, once she simply lay down in the road and refused to move. And 3 times, the man who spoke to God for a living beat the animal for the interruption. Chosen one, hear what that story is actually about. It is not about a talking donkey. It is about a spiritually gifted person whose perception had fallen below the perception of a beast of burden, and who interpreted his own protection as an obstacle, and who responded to it with anger. 3 times something stopped you this year, and 3 times you overrode it and called your override faith. I am not saying that to shame you. I am saying it because the same account contains the remedy, and the remedy is very simple and very hard. The scripture says the Lord opened his eyes, not the road, not the situation, the eyes. Nothing about the danger changed. What changed was the resolution of the instrument being used to look at it. That is the whole prayer for this season, and I would like you to actually pray it and not just hear it, not open the door, not remove the obstacle. Open my eyes. Now let me give you the mechanism, because you were promised 3 signatures tonight, and we have covered the first one. The second signature lives in your body, and it is the most reliable of the 3, and almost nobody has been taught how to read it. We call it the peace that tightens. Here is the principle. Real peace expands. Counterfeit peace constricts. They both feel like calm from a distance, and they behave in completely opposite directions when you move toward them. The word for peace in the older language is shalom, and it does not mean the absence of conflict. That is a modern misunderstanding that has cost people enormously. Shalom means wholeness, completeness, nothing missing and nothing broken. It is a word about structural integrity, not about mood, which means the real test of peace is not whether you feel calm, it is whether you feel whole. And this is why so many people have been deceived by their own tranquility. You can feel calm about something that is quietly subtracting from you. Sedation feels like peace. Resignation feels like peace. Relief feels like peace. And relief is the single most misread emotion in the spiritual life, because relief always arrives at the end of pressure, and pressure is exactly what a counterfeit uses to move you. Chosen one, do not confuse the sensation of the pressure ending with the confirmation that the choice was right. Of course, it feels better once you have decided. Any decision ends the discomfort of deciding. That improvement tells you nothing at all about the destination. So here is how to read it properly, and this is something you can do in 90 seconds in a parking lot before you walk into the room. Bring the decision to mind fully, not the abstract version, the specific version, the actual person, the actual number, the actual date, the actual room. Then pay attention to 2 things only: your breath depth and your field of view. When something is genuinely aligned, the breath goes lower and the field widens. That is the physical signature of expansion. You will notice that you can suddenly think about other parts of your life without strain. Your mother, next year, a conversation you were dreading. Everything stays accessible. When something is a substitution, the breath rises and the field narrows. Everything in your awareness collapses onto the one subject. You cannot hold the rest of your life in view while you hold this. It becomes the only thing. And here is the tell that removes all doubt. You will notice that you do not want to think about certain people while thinking about this. That last one is decisive. Write it down. Anything that requires you to keep specific people out of your mind in order to remain peaceful is not peace, it is containment. Real shalom can hold your whole life at once. That is what wholeness means. If a thing can only remain peaceful, inside a shrinking room, then the peace belongs to the room and not to you. Chosen one, I want to name something that may be happening in you right now, because it happens to almost everybody at this exact point in a message like this one. Some of you have just realized that you have been living inside a narrowed field for a long time, not because of the decision in front of you this week, because of one you made years ago, and a wave of something is moving through you right now that feels a lot like grief. Stay with me. Do not go anywhere. That recognition is not the beginning of condemnation. It is the beginning of return, and return is always available, and it is available at a much lower price than the enemy has been telling you. Because here is what I know about substitutions, after living through a few of them. They are reversible, far more often than people believe. Not painlessly, but reversibly. The thing you gave your years to is not owed the rest of them. There is no spiritual law that says a wrong turn must be honored for life out of consistency. Consistency is not a virtue when it is aimed at the wrong horizon. If this message has already found the real thing in your life, and you know exactly which decision I am describing, take one moment and simply write the word restored in the comments below. Say nothing else if you do not want to, but say that because there is something that happens in a person when they let hope be witnessed. Now let me put a new picture in your hands, because we have looked at snares and keys and ships, and this next one explains something the others cannot. Imagine a room with no bars anywhere in it. It is a beautiful room. It is warm. The furniture is comfortable. There is food on the table, and the food is good. The temperature is exactly right. Nothing in it hurts you, and if a visitor walked through, they would see nothing wrong at all and would probably congratulate you. And the door is not locked. That is important. The door has never been locked, but there is one property of that room that nobody notices from the inside. It has no windows. Everything you can see because it is inside the room. Your entire sense of what is possible has quietly been reduced to the dimensions of the space you are standing in, and because the space is pleasant, you have no motivation to test the walls. Chosen one, that is what a comfortable substitution actually does to a life. It does not hurt you. It shrinks your visible sky. And a person will stay in a windowless room for 20 years if the room is warm enough, not because they are trapped, but because they have stopped being able to picture anything outside it. That is why heaven sometimes lets a comfortable arrangement become uncomfortable, not as punishment, as a window. Think about the last 2 years of your life for a moment. Think about the things that stopped working, the arrangements that became strained, the relationships that got quiet, the doors that closed without explanation. What if a portion of that was not attack? What if a portion of that was ventilation? I am not going to tell you that every hard thing was God. That would be a cruel and lazy theology, and I will not hand it to you. Some of what you have been through was simply the brokenness of a broken world, and some of it was other people, and some of it was the enemy, and none of it was your fault. But some of it was a wall being removed so that you could see further than the room allowed. And you have been mourning the wall. Chosen one, look at what you can see now that you could not see 3 years ago. Look at what you understand now about people, about your own patterns, about the difference between being wanted and being valued. You did not learn any of that in comfort. You learned it in the draft that came through the opening. And I want to say this as gently and as directly as I know how. The reason you can hear this message tonight and actually receive it instead of arguing with it is that you have been through enough demolition to have windows. The person in the sealed room could not have heard a word of this. They would have found it negative. You are not behind because of what you lost. You are ahead because of what you can see. Now, I want to hand you the practical shape of this so it does not stay poetic. For the next 7 days, run one experiment. Each time you make any decision, small or large, note 2 things afterward. Did my breathing go lower or higher? Did my sense of my own life get wider or narrower? Do it with tiny things. What you eat, whether you answer the message, whether you say yes to the extra shift. You are not training discernment for the big decision. You are calibrating an instrument, and instruments are calibrated on known quantities before they are trusted on unknown ones. Within a week, you will have something most people never develop in a lifetime, which is a personal baseline. And once you have a baseline, deviation becomes obvious. That is the entire secret. Discernment is not a mystical download. It is pattern recognition running on a properly calibrated instrument. Which brings us to the question that has been sitting underneath this whole message, and the one I promised I would answer. Why did the instrument go quiet in the first place? Before I answer that, I owe you one more piece of the picture, because there is a version of this teaching that would leave you thinking you are unusually vulnerable, and the truth is the opposite. You are not targeted because you are weak. You are targeted because you are sincere. Sincerity is the most exploitable quality a person can carry, and I want you to understand why so you can stop treating yours as a liability. A cynical person cannot be moved by a counterfeit, because a cynical person cannot be moved by anything. They are safe from the snare, in the same way a person locked in a basement is safe from the weather. Nothing reaches them, including the real thing. But you kept your capacity to hope. Through everything, through the years it embarrassed you, through the seasons when hoping made you look foolish in front of practical people, you kept the ability to believe that a good thing could still happen to you. Chosen one, that capacity is the most valuable thing you own, and it is the exact surface a counterfeit needs in order to land, which is why the answer was never to reduce your hope. It was to increase your resolution. Do not let anybody talk you into becoming harder. Hardness is not protection. Hardness is a slow surrender that looks like strength for about 10 years and then reveals itself as a life nobody was allowed into. The goal is to be soft and unfoolable at the same time. That combination is rare, and it is not a personality. It is a skill, and skills are built. I watched a woman learn this in front of me over about 18 months, and I want to tell you a little of it because you may recognize yourself. She had been through a marriage that ended in a way that left her doubting her own perception of reality. Not because the person was a monster, but because she had ignored 100 small signals over a decade, and afterward she could not forgive herself for any of them. And the thing she said to me most often in the first year was not, "I am heartbroken." It was, "I cannot trust myself." So when a good man appeared, she did the thing that trauma teaches. She outsourced. She asked 6 people what they thought. She made lists. She looked for signs. She did everything except the one thing she was terrified to do, which was to feel her own body in his presence and take the reading seriously. What eventually changed her was not a revelation. It was practice on small things. She started noticing what her chest did in ordinary rooms, at work, with her sister, in the grocery store. And within a few months she had a baseline. And once she had a baseline, she could feel the difference between the discomfort of being known and the discomfort of being managed. She married him 3 years ago. And the thing she says now is not that she found the right person. She says she got her instrument back. Chosen one, look at what that means for your own relationships, and let yourself see it for a moment rather than hurrying past it. See the version of your life where you can tell, within one conversation, whether a person is safe. Not by rules, not by red flags from an article, by reading. See yourself no longer needing 6 friends to vote on your decisions, because the vote is happening inside you and you can hear it. See the relationships that quietly fall away in that season, and see how little it costs you, because you finally understand that not everything that leaves was taken from you. Some of it was released. And see the ones that remain. Fewer, deeper. Nobody in your inner circle who requires management. Nobody who needs you to be smaller so that they can stay comfortable. A table with fewer chairs and better conversation. That is not a fantasy, and I am not promising you a timeline. I am describing what becomes structurally possible in the life of a person whose reading capacity has been restored, because relationships are downstream of perception, every single one of them. Now hold both pictures together for a moment. The money that stops leaking, the table with fewer chairs. Neither of those comes from trying harder. They come from the same upstream repair, which is exactly why I have to answer the question I left open. Because if perception is the upstream cause of nearly everything else in your life, then the most important question you could possibly ask tonight is not what is the trap. It is what happened to my ability to see it. Chosen one, as we move deeper into this next layer, I want to take you to the single most instructive failure in all of sacred history, and it is a failure that has nothing to do with sin. A nation had just come through the most spectacular victories of its existence. Walls had fallen, cities had been taken. Their leader was a man of enormous integrity who had personally heard God speak. By every measure, they were at the peak of their spiritual authority. And then some travelers arrived at the camp. They came with sacks that were torn and mended. Their wineskins were cracked and tied back together. Their sandals were worn thin and patched, and their clothing was faded from what they said was a very long road. And the bread in their bags was dry and crumbling and covered in mold. They said they had come from a far country. They said they had heard about this God and had traveled for weeks to make a treaty, and they held up the bread as evidence. "Look," they said, "it was warm when we packed it." The leaders of the nation examined the provisions. That is the phrase the text uses. They looked at the bread. They inspected the sandals. They performed what any reasonable person would call due diligence. And then they made a treaty and swore an oath in the name of the Lord. And then comes the sentence, and I want you to hear it exactly as it stands, because it is one of the most surgical sentences in the entire library of Scripture. They did not ask counsel of the Lord. That is all. No rebellion, no idolatry, no moral collapse. Just a small procedural absence in the middle of a very reasonable process, made by good men on a good day. And it cost that nation a permanent obligation to a people they were never supposed to be bound to. 3 days later, they discovered the truth. The travelers lived 4 hours away. The mold was manufactured. The sandals were deliberately damaged. The entire presentation had been engineered by people who had studied exactly what this nation would find convincing. Chosen one, we call this the Gibeon mistake. The Gibeon mistake is not being deceived. It is being deceived while examining. It is the specific failure of a person who investigates thoroughly at the level of evidence and never once elevates the question to the level of counsel. And you have made it, so have I. Most of us made it recently. Because notice what they did do. They were not careless. They inspected, they asked questions, they gathered data. If you had watched them work, you would have said these are careful people. And every single piece of data they collected was true. The bread really was moldy. The sandals really were worn. They read accurate evidence and arrived at a catastrophic conclusion because the evidence had been assembled by someone who knew what evidence they would look at. That is the third signature, and it is the one that separates the people who get caught from the people who do not. Not the absence of investigation, the absence of inquiry. Let me draw the distinction as sharply as I can, because everything practical in the rest of this message depends on it. Investigation asks, is this true? Inquiry asks, is this mine? Investigation operates on the thing in front of you. Inquiry operates on your assignment. Investigation can be satisfied completely and leave you standing in the exact wrong room, because a thing can be entirely genuine and entirely not yours, and no amount of examining it will ever reveal that, because the information is not located in the object. It is located in your calling. Chosen one, the Gibeonites really were travelers. They really did want a treaty. They really would honor it, and they did, for centuries. Every fact was verifiable. The only unverifiable thing was whether this belonged in the story, and that question has never once been answerable by inspection. That is why the counterfeit survives your due diligence. You keep interrogating the object. The object is not lying to you. The object is simply in the wrong place, and objects cannot tell you where they belong. Now let me give you inquiry as an actual practice, because I have heard people teach this my whole life, and almost nobody ever says how. The first movement is naming. Say the thing out loud, alone, in plain language, with no spiritual vocabulary attached to it. Not, God has opened a door for me. Say, I am considering taking this job, which pays this much, and requires these hours from these people. Most substitutions cannot survive being described plainly. They require the vocabulary of destiny in order to keep their glow. And the moment you strip that away and speak the actual facts into an empty room, you will hear something in your own voice that you have been talking over. The second movement is silence with a question, not silence with a hope. There is an enormous difference. Most of us pray about a decision the way Balaam did, which is to bring an answer we already want and ask for it to be ratified. Real inquiry means asking a question you are genuinely willing to lose. Ask, "Is this mine?" And then be prepared to hear no, and notice whether you are prepared. If you are not prepared to hear no, you are not inquiring, you are lobbying. The third movement is time, not a lot. 3 days is usually enough, and 3 days is a pattern that appears throughout the sacred texts for exactly this reason. 3 days is long enough for adrenaline to metabolize and short enough that no genuine opportunity is lost. If you take nothing else from tonight, take the 3-day rule and apply it to everything that matters for the rest of your life. The fourth movement is witness. One person, not 6. One person who is not benefiting from your decision in any way, who has known you long enough to have watched you make a mistake, and who is not afraid of you. That last qualification eliminates most of the people you would have called. If everyone you would ask is either invested or intimidated, you do not have counsel. You have an audience. Chosen one. Those 4 movements take about 72 hours, and they would have prevented nearly every disaster in my life. Name it plainly. Ask a question you could lose. Give it 3 days. Bring one unafraid witness. Now I want to show you something in that story that almost nobody notices, and it is the reason I have hope for everyone listening tonight who is already bound to something. Joshua kept the treaty. He discovered the deception. He named it publicly, and then he honored the oath anyway, and the nation grumbled about it bitterly. But here is what happened afterward, and it is extraordinary. Those deceivers became woodcutters and water carriers for the house of God. The people who had lied their way into the story ended up serving inside it for generations. And later, when 5 kings came to destroy them, Joshua marched all night to defend the very people who had tricked him, and that was the day the sun stood still. The single greatest miracle of his military career happened while he was defending the consequences of his own mistake. Chosen one, receive this. God is not finished with a life that made a wrong treaty. He does not require your history to be clean in order to do something historic through you. The mistake was real, the cost was real, and the miracle still came, and it came inside the mess rather than after it was cleaned up. So, if you are sitting there tonight already bound to something, already 3 years into a substitution, already carrying an obligation you would not choose again, hear me clearly. You are not disqualified. You are located, and being located is the beginning of every rescue that has ever happened. Chosen one, there is one more face of this I have to show you before we go further, because the Gibeon mistake has a twin, and the twin lives in the opposite direction. Some of you are not in danger of accepting a counterfeit. Some of you are in danger of rejecting the real thing because it did not arrive with the packaging you were taught to expect. There was a day when a prophet was sent to a house to anoint a future king, and he walked in and saw the oldest son, tall, impressive. Exactly what a king is supposed to look like in the imagination of everybody who has ever needed one. And the prophet said, "Surely this is the anointed one standing here in front of me." And he was corrected, not gently. He was told that man looks at the outward appearance and God looks at the heart. And then he was made to stand there while 7 sons passed in front of him, and none of them were the one, until finally somebody remembered that there was another boy out in the field with the animals, and nobody had thought him worth calling in. Chosen one, the same eyes that get deceived by an excellent forgery also reject an unimpressive original. It is one failure, not 2. Both come from evaluating by surface, and the surface can be dressed up or dressed down with equal ease. So do not walk out of tonight suspicious of anything that looks good. That is not the lesson. The lesson is that appearance carries no information in either direction, and a person who has learned to distrust attractive things has simply moved their blindness to the other side of the room. The real thing often shows up underdressed. It often shows up smaller than you imagined and slower than you wanted. and through a door you did not consider prestigious. It has no interest in impressing you because it is not trying to get past your defenses. It has authorization. That is a signature too, and it is the gentlest one. What is truly yours does not audition. Now let me show you the oldest transaction in this entire category, because it is the shortest and most brutal illustration of what hunger does to valuation. A man came in from the field, exhausted, and his brother was cooking. And he said, "Give me some of that red stew. I am about to die." He was not about to die. That is important. He was tired and he was hungry, and he was 30 seconds into a feeling that he interpreted as an emergency. And his brother said, "Sell me your birthright first." Now stop and consider the arithmetic of that moment. A birthright in that culture was a double portion of everything, plus the headship of the family line, plus the spiritual leadership of the household, plus the covenant that had been spoken over their grandfather. It was, quite literally, the entire future, and he traded it for one bowl of lentils. Not because he was evil, because he was hungry, and because in the moment of hunger the future had no weight, and the bowl had all of it. Chosen one, hear the mechanism. Hunger does not make you want the wrong thing. Hunger makes you misprice the right thing. Everything distant becomes worth less. Everything immediate becomes worth more. And you can watch this happen inside your own chest tonight, if you are honest about it. That is why the counterfeit almost always arrives at the end of a long depletion. Not at your strongest hour, at the hour when the future feels theoretical and the bowl is right there and it is warm. So here is a rule I want you to write somewhere. You will see it during the next hard week. Never price your future during a famine. You are allowed to eat. That is not the issue. Eat, rest, take the temporary work, accept the help. What you are not allowed to do is negotiate the permanent things while your body is screaming. Feed yourself first and then decide. Those are two separate acts, and the entire tragedy of that story is that he collapsed them into one. And listen, if you have already traded something in a moment of depletion, do not sit in the shame of it tonight. There is a line in that account that people rarely notice. Later, much later, he sought the blessing with tears, and it is described as a sorrow that could not undo the transaction. But that is not the last word on that family, because generations later, the descendants of both brothers were still standing, and the covenant did not die, and God kept speaking. The consequence was real, and the story was not over. Both things are true, and any teacher who gives you only one of them is selling you either despair or denial. Chosen one, pause with me right here for a moment, because I know some of you are carrying something heavy at this point in the message. Wherever you are, let your hands open. Picture the specific thing you traded, not everything, one thing. See it clearly, the way it actually happened, without the story you have built around it to make it survivable. And now say this quietly, out loud if you can. I made that decision with the instrument I had at the time. That sentence is not an excuse. It is an accurate description, and accuracy is what dissolves shame. You did not choose to have a dull instrument. You did not know it was dull. Nobody told you it could be sharpened. And you made a reasonable decision inside a compromised perception, which is the same thing that happened to Joshua on the best day of his career. Let it go for a moment, just for the length of one breath. Feel the difference in your shoulders when you stop defending a decision you already regret. And if that landed anywhere real in you tonight, write the word released in the comments below. One word, that is all. Because there is something that happens in a person when they stop carrying a verdict in private. Now let me close the loop that has been open since the beginning of this message. I told you earlier that something had been documented in research laboratories that most spiritually attentive people have never been told about, and I said I would come back to it. And I want to tell you why I waited until now to bring it forward. Because what they found is not information. What they found is an explanation. And an explanation is only useful to a person who already understands the full shape of the problem it explains. You now understand the shape. You understand that the counterfeit is built from your own prayer. You understand that hurry exists to prevent inquiry. You understand that peace either expands or constricts and that your body reads it before your mind does. And you understand that inspection is not inquiry. So the only question left is the one I have been holding for you since the beginning. If you were designed with an instrument capable of reading all of this, an instrument that a child uses effortlessly and that you can feel yourself using less and less every year, then what exactly happened to it? Why does the reading come through so faintly now? Why does it take you 3 weeks to know something you would have known in 3 seconds at 19? Why can you feel the warning arriving and still not be able to resolve it into anything you can act on? Chosen one, that is not a spiritual failure. It never was. And the answer is far more concrete than anybody has told you. Chosen one, I want to answer that question now, and I want to answer it with more honesty than this subject usually receives. Think about what you were like as a child. Not sentimentally, specifically. Think about how fast you learned things. Think about how you could walk into a room and know within seconds which adult was safe and which one was not, without a single piece of evidence, and how often you were right. Think about the questions you asked that made grown people uncomfortable. Think about how you could be absorbed in something for 4 hours and it felt like 10 minutes. That was not innocence, that was capacity. And somewhere along the line it thinned, not all at once. There was no single day, just a slow, decade-long reduction that you eventually stopped noticing because it happened at the same speed as your life. And because it was gradual, you attributed it to the only categories anybody ever gave you: getting older, getting tired, getting busy, losing your spark, not praying enough. Chosen one, I want to give this its right name, because the wrong name has been eating your confidence for years. We call it the partial receiver. Here is the principle. A signal can be broadcast perfectly and still arrive as noise if the receiver is operating at partial capacity. And when that happens, the person on the receiving end almost never blames the receiver. They blame the signal, or they blame themselves for not being spiritual enough to hear it. You have been doing that for years. Every time the guidance came through faint and you concluded that God had gone quiet. Every time you could feel that something was wrong and could not resolve it into words, and you decided you were being paranoid. Every time you knew and did not know at the same time. That was never a faith problem. That was a resolution problem, and resolution is physical. Now let me be careful here, because I am not going to reduce your spiritual life to biology, and I would not insult you by trying. There is a real spirit and a real God and a real voice, and none of that is being explained away tonight. But you live in a body. The signal has to land somewhere, and the equipment it lands in has been under a specific kind of pressure for your entire adult life, and almost nobody in a spiritual room has ever said that out loud. Consider what the last 20 years have actually done to your attention. Consider that you have not experienced boredom since roughly 2012. Consider that your mind has been interrupted on average every few minutes for a decade, that you have been consuming information designed by teams of specialists to fragment your focus, and that the fragmentation is not a side effect, it is the product. Chosen one, discernment requires an unfragmented mind. That is not a metaphor. The capacity to hold two things side by side and notice the seam between them requires a mind that can hold two things at once. And you have been systematically trained out of that ability by an environment that profits from it. So when I tell you that the reason you missed the last one was not a lack of faith, I am not being kind to you, I am being accurate. But here is where most messages like this one stop. And this is where I refuse to stop, because a diagnosis without a repair is just a more sophisticated way to make somebody feel hopeless. There is also something else happening beneath all of this, and it is the part I have been holding since the beginning. What if the reduction was not natural? What if the thinning of that childhood capacity is not an inevitable feature of getting older, but a documented, measurable, and specifically reversible physiological condition that almost every adult in the modern world is walking around inside of, without ever once being told that it has a name? Let me stop being poetic and tell you plainly what I know, because you have earned a direct answer. Here is the why. Everything we have described tonight, the counterfeit built from your prayer, the hurry that prevents inquiry, the peace that tightens, the inspection that is not inquiry, all of it depends on one single human capacity, the ability to perceive a difference. That is the whole thing. Discernment is not a special anointing reserved for a few people. It is a perceptual act, and perception happens in a specific place, using specific equipment, and that equipment can be running at full capacity or partial capacity. Here is the what. There is a measurable state in which both hemispheres of the human brain operate in synchronization with one another, rather than in the split, dominant, task-locked pattern that modern adult life produces. Researchers call the synchronized state whole brain activation. It is the state children live in almost constantly. It is the state that people describe when they talk about flow, or knowing something before they can explain it, or seeing the answer arrive whole instead of assembled. It is not mystical, and it is not new. It was established through split brain research that received the Nobel Prize in 1981, and the researcher behind it was Dr. Roger Sperry. And here is the who. The findings say that roughly 98% of children test at what researchers classify as creative genius level, and that fewer than 1 in 1,000 adults still test there. That is not a story about talent. That is a story about a capacity that nearly everybody is born with, and nearly everybody loses, and the loss tracks almost exactly with exposure to modern life, rather than with age. Chosen one, sit with that number for one moment. 98%, down to less than 1 in 1,000. That is not decline, that is subtraction. You did not lose your edge. Something was taken at a level you were never taught to defend. You already know what that clarity felt like, and you already know what it feels like to be missing it. Now, a team of neuroscientists led by Dr. Daniel Barone in New York spent years working on the practical side of this question. Not whether the synchronized state exists, which was settled decades ago, but whether an adult can be returned to it reliably without a clinic, without equipment, and without years of practice. I want to tell you about 2 people before I tell you what they built, because the outcomes matter more than the mechanism. A woman from California described what her life felt like before she found this. She had tried everything her community offered: prayer, journaling, meditation, retreats, every practice anybody recommended, and she kept arriving at the same place. She believed the words. She could not feel the reality behind them, not in her body and not in the ordinary texture of her days. After about 10 days of using what this team developed, she said something cleared. A channel that had been blocked was suddenly open, not because she tried harder, because the receiver had been repaired. A man from Texas described something similar from a completely different direction. He had spent years holding things together for everybody around him, while his own interior life became thin and distant. He said prayer had started to feel like speaking into a wall. The signal was fine, the reception was not. 2 weeks in, he woke up one morning and described his mind as running on all of what it was supposed to be running on. The fog that had been so constant that he had stopped registering it as fog was simply gone, and the first thing he noticed was that he could tell, immediately, which of 2 business decisions was the wrong one. That is because of what the team I am about to describe actually discovered. They took over an hour of clinical neural sync technology, the kind of whole brain activation protocol used in specialized medical settings, and through an intensive process of compression and refinement, they turned it into an 8-minute targeted auditory sequence. 8 minutes a day, headphones, eyes closed. That is the entirety of the physical requirement. They call it the genius switch. And I want to be precise about what it is not, because some of you have been down this road before and came back disappointed. It is not a brainwave product. It is not a meditation application. It is not a sound designed to put you in a particular mood for a while. If you have used binaural or isochronic tracks and found them underwhelming, Dr. Barone addresses that directly, because those products target one narrow slice of the picture. What his team built targets hemisphere synchronization at the whole brain level. using a multi-layer protocol developed from years of clinical refinement. That is a different mechanism, and a different mechanism produces a different category of result. The genius switch reconnects the two hemispheres so that the state you lived in as a child, the one where you could read a room in 4 seconds, becomes available to an adult nervous system again. You do not meditate. You do not repeat anything. You do not have to believe in it. It operates beneath your awareness while you sit there with your eyes closed. And chosen one, hear how directly this lands on everything we have discussed for the last hour. Every single signature I gave you tonight requires perception in order to be useful. The still air test requires you to feel the difference between disappointment and dread. The peace reading requires you to notice whether your field of view widened or narrowed. Inquiry requires a mind quiet enough to hear an answer it did not want. A tool cannot make you obedient. A tool cannot love God for you. But a tool that restores the resolution of the instrument makes every single one of those readings clearer. And clearer readings are the entire difference between the person who walks past the snare and the person who steps into it. The genius switch is not for everyone. It is for the chosen one who understands that God prepared not only the promise but the mind that has to walk into it. The person who has been sincere for years, who has done the work, who has kept returning to the call, even when the evidence was not cooperating, and who is finally willing to stop treating the fog as a character flaw and start treating it as something that has a specific address. Most people who hear about this will scroll past it. They have accepted the reduced version of their own mind as permanent, and they are not going to argue with it tonight. You are still here. That is not a coincidence. That is the exact kind of persistence that belongs to the person this was built for. Here is what it costs. And I am going to be completely straightforward with you. Colleagues who reviewed it told Dr. Barone that it would be an extraordinary value at $500, and that is not an inflated comparison. In-person neurofeedback runs about $300 an hour. A home neurofeedback machine runs about $7,000. It was not released at $500. It was not released at $200. It was not released at $100. It was released at $49. And on the page where his team made it available, there is an additional $10 off, $39, one-time, lifetime access, delivered to your email immediately, no shipping. 4 bonuses are included at that price. A guided visualization from a top-rated creator on the Calm application, walking you through money, love, health, and happiness. A smart grocery guide listing 10 common American foods that contribute to brain fog, and 5 shortcuts that save over $100 a month at the stores you already shop in. A manifestation text more than 100 years old that most modern teaching was quietly built on top of, which sells for around $20 on its own. And a printable infographic of the 5 habits that most reliably shape a future you actually want. And it is backed by an unconditional money-back guarantee. Listen to it once. Listen to it 80 times. If it does not do for you what it has done for over 18,000 people, every dollar comes back to you. No conditions and no argument. Now hear the urgency correctly, because I refuse to manufacture pressure in a message about the dangers of hurry. There is no countdown here, and nobody is taking anything away from you tonight. The provision God has already arranged near you becomes visible in the synchronized state in a way that it simply is not in the partial state. Not because the provision is new, because the receiver that can recognize it has been restored. What has been arranged for you is already in motion. The only question is whether you arrive at the meeting point with the instrument online. One thing worth naming plainly: if you search for anything with a similar name on the usual audio platforms, you will find tracks. Dr. Barone and his team examined them. Most had no neural sync technology in them at all. They carry the name because the barrier to labeling something is essentially zero. The mechanism is what makes the difference, and the mechanism only exists in what his team actually built. The direct page is the only verified source, and that is where the link points. So, if your spirit resonates with what has been described, the link in the description below and in the pinned comment is where you will find it. You can read everything on their page before deciding anything. Every detail is laid out. And if it is not for you, close it with a clear conscience and stay right here with me, because the most important part of tonight has not happened yet. The tool does not replace God. It does not replace obedience. It does not surrender anything on your behalf, and it does not close a single door for you. What God is doing in you is not conditional on any tool that any human being has ever built. But a repaired receiver gives what God is doing more of what it was designed to land in. And the deeper current of this message is where we return now. Chosen one, as we move into this next unfolding of the message, let your spirit come back to the ground it was standing on before we took that detour, because the ground has changed slightly, and you may not have noticed. You came into tonight with a decision in front of you and a bad feeling underneath it. That has not changed. What has changed is that you now know 4 things you did not know an hour ago, and any one of them would have been worth the time. You know the counterfeit is assembled from your prayer, which means precision is not proof. You know hurry exists to close the window on inquiry, which means the clock is the tell. You know real peace expands your field and counterfeit peace narrows it, which means your body is a legitimate instrument. And you know that inspection is not inquiry, which means the 4 movements matter more than any amount of research. That is more than most people learn about discernment in a decade of sitting in good rooms. But there is one more thing, and it is the largest one, and it is the reason I have kept you this long. Because everything I have given you so far assumes that the thing in front of you is either a snare or a gift. And chosen one, there is a third possibility that almost nobody ever names, and it is the one your situation is most likely to actually be. Almost everybody who ever gets stuck in a decision is stuck because they are holding only 2 doors in their mind. Door 1 is yes, door 2 is no. And the entire agony of the last few weeks has been you standing in a hallway trying to determine which of those 2 doors has God behind it, exhausting yourself, praying about it, losing sleep over it, and getting nowhere. Chosen one, the reason you are getting nowhere is that the answer is very often the third door. The third door is the answer that says, this is real, and it is not now, and there is something specific for you to do during the interval. Not yes, not no, not yet, with instructions. And I want you to notice something about your own spiritual training. Nobody ever taught you what to do with a not yet. You were taught to believe for a yes, and you were taught to accept a no. And the vast, enormous middle territory where most of a human life actually takes place was left completely undescribed. So when a not yet arrives, you have no category for it. And a person with no category for the answer they are receiving will always convert it into one of the 2 categories they do have, which means every not yet gets misread either as a no, and you walk away from something that was genuinely yours, or as a yes, and you force something into a season that could not hold it. That single missing category has probably cost you more than every counterfeit combined. Let me show you what a not yet looks like when you can actually see it, because it has a signature just like everything else tonight. A not yet is the thing that keeps coming back. It does not resolve, and it does not disappear. It goes quiet for 4 months and then returns in a different form, through a different person, from a different direction. A closed door stays closed. A snare gets increasingly expensive to refuse, but a not yet circles patiently, and it never punishes you for the delay. A not yet also produces preparation instead of pressure. When something is genuinely coming and simply is not here, you will notice that your life keeps handing you the exact skills, relationships, and hard lessons that the thing will require. That is the loudest confirmation available on this earth, and almost nobody reads it, because it does not feel like confirmation. It feels like a random, difficult season. Chosen one, look at the last 3 years of your life through that lens for 1 minute. What have you been given the ability to do that you did not have before? What have you survived that made you unshockable? Who did you become in the room where nothing was happening? If the answer to those questions lines up suspiciously well with the thing you have been praying for, you were never being denied. You were being outfitted. And here is the instruction part, because a not yet always comes with something to do, And this is the part that turns waiting from suffering into construction. Build the part that does not require the door. There is always a part. If the business is not open, the skill can still be learned. If the person has not arrived, the capacity to be known can still be developed. If the platform has not come, the message can still be written. If the money has not moved, the discipline that will keep it can still be installed. The genius of this is that the counterfeit cannot survive it. A substitution has no interest in a person who is busy building, because the whole leverage of a snare is idleness plus hunger. Remove either one and it loses its grip. This is why the most protected people in the world are not the most suspicious ones. They are the most occupied ones, and occupied in the right direction. Now let me tell you what happens to a person who takes a yes that was supposed to be a not yet, because this is the deepest cost in the entire message, and I have not named it yet. There was a king before David. He was chosen, anointed, taller than everybody, and the beginning of his story is genuinely good. And the thing that ended him was not adultery or murder or idolatry. It was 7 days. He was told to wait 7 days for the prophet to come and offer the sacrifice. On the 7th day, the prophet was late. The army was scattering. The enemy was gathering. Everything visible said that waiting was now irresponsible and that leadership means acting. So he offered the sacrifice himself, and the moment he finished, the prophet arrived. Chosen one, hear the timing in that. He did not miss it by a month. He missed it by minutes. And what he lost was not that battle. What he lost was the continuation of his line. The point is not that God is harsh about scheduling. The point is what that decision revealed and then installed. Because the moment you take authority that has not been released to you, you have to keep taking it forever in every subsequent situation, since you have just demonstrated to yourself that the timing of heaven is unreliable and that your own hand is the only thing that can be counted on. We call this the borrowed crown. The borrowed crown is what a person is wearing when they hold a position that was genuinely theirs, but taken early by their own hand before it was placed there. And it is the most exhausting object a human being can carry, because a crown that was given rests on you, and a crown that was taken must be held up. You can identify people wearing one from a long way off, and you probably have several in your life. They cannot rest. They cannot be corrected. Every question about their position feels like an attack, because underneath everything, they know how they got there. They are not evil. They are tired in a way that sleep does not touch. And here is what I want you to know. If you recognize yourself, you can put it down. That is the mercy in all of this. A borrowed crown can be returned, and the returning is not a demotion. It is the beginning of the only version of that thing that was ever going to be sustainable. I watched a man do it. He had built something real, and he had built it 3 years before he was ready, using leverage that was not his and relationships he had pressed too hard, and it worked. That is the hard part. It worked well enough that everybody congratulated him, and nobody knew what it cost him to keep it upright. He stepped back, voluntarily. He handed off pieces, shrank the thing down to what he could actually carry, and he told me it was the most humiliating 6 months of his adult life. And then, 2 years later, the thing was larger than it had ever been, and he was sleeping. And the difference was that this time it was standing on its own, and not on him. Chosen one, some of you are being invited to put something down this month, and you have been interpreting the invitation as failure. It is not failure. It is the exchange of a borrowed crown for a given one, and heaven does not consider that a loss. Now let me contrast that with the other man in the same story, because the comparison is where the teaching lands. David was anointed as a teenager and did not sit on the throne for years. And during that gap, he was hunted, slandered, forced to live in caves, and reduced to pretending to be insane in front of a foreign king in order to survive. That is what the interval looked like for the man who had already been anointed. And twice, he had the man who was hunting him completely at his mercy. Once in a cave where he was close enough to cut a piece from his robe without being noticed. And his own men whispered to him that this was clearly God delivering the enemy into his hand. that this was the moment, that the promise was finally being fulfilled, and all he had to do was reach out. Chosen one, notice that the most dangerous counterfeit in his entire life came dressed as the fulfillment of a genuine prophecy delivered through people who loved him at a moment when the opportunity was undeniable and the logic was perfect. Every single element of a snare was present, including a correct promise being used as the bait. And he refused it, not because it was hard, because he understood something about how a throne works. A throne taken by your own hand has to be defended by your own hand for the rest of your life. A throne given to you is defended by the one who gave it. That is the entire difference between the two men, and it is the entire difference in front of you this week. Let me make that practical, because you are not choosing thrones, you are choosing much smaller things that add up to the same thing. Whenever an opportunity requires you to take something rather than receive it, slow down. Taking has a distinct texture. It requires you to move first, to press, to convince, to position yourself, to make sure you are seen at the right moment. Receiving has a completely different texture. It arrives. You may have worked for years toward it, but at the point of transfer, you are not the one applying force. Ask yourself one question about whatever is in front of you. Am I being handed this, or am I taking it while telling myself it was handed to me? And if it is the second one, that does not automatically make it wrong, but it means the cost of it will be ongoing, and you should count that cost before you sign, because nobody counts it afterward, and everybody pays it. Chosen one. If this is speaking directly into something you are holding right now, take a moment and simply write the words "not yet" in the comments below. Not as resignation, as a declaration that you are willing to receive rather than seize. There is more power in those two words than in any amount of striving you could do this month. Chosen one, before we gather everything up, there is one more story I have to put in your hands, and it is the gentlest one of the night. It is about a counterfeit that removed itself. A woman named Ruth had lost everything and had followed her mother-in-law into a country where she was a foreigner with no standing. And a man named Boaz noticed her, protected her, and was willing to redeem her situation entirely. But there was a problem. There was another man, a relative who stood closer in the family line, who had the legal first right to redeem the land and everything attached to it. And by every rule of that culture, the nearer man had the prior claim. Now imagine standing where Ruth stood on that particular night. The one who had shown you kindness, who had gone out of his way, whose character you had watched in the fields for weeks, was not the one with the right. Somebody you had never met held the claim on your entire future, and there was nothing in the world you could do about it. That is what it feels like when the wrong thing is standing in the position of the right thing, and you have no authority to remove it. And here is what happened. Boaz did not scheme. He did not discredit the other man. He went to the gate, in daylight, in public, and he named the situation openly and gave the nearer relative the first opportunity, exactly as he was entitled to. The nearer man said yes to the land, and then Boaz mentioned that the land came with the woman and with the obligation to raise up a name for the dead. And the man said, "I cannot do it. I would ruin my own inheritance." And he removed his sandal and stepped out of the position. Chosen one, receive this carefully, because there is enormous rest inside it. The counterfeit was removed by the terms of the thing itself. Nobody had to fight it. The moment the full cost of the real assignment was placed on the table, the one who was never meant to carry it disqualified himself in public. That is very often exactly how heaven clears your path, not with a dramatic intervention, with disclosure. The full weight of what you carry is simply made visible, and whatever cannot carry it leaves on its own. Which means some of the exits in your life over the last 2 years were not rejections of you, they were disclosures. People saw the actual cost of standing where they were standing next to you, and they could not pay it, and they left, and you have spent months grieving as though something was taken. Nothing was taken. A sandal was removed at the gate. And notice the last detail, because it is the one that changes how you read your own delays. If the nearer relative had said yes, the entire line that leads through David, and eventually through everything that follows, would have gone through a different house. The delay at the gate was not an obstacle in the story. The delay at the gate was the mechanism by which the story arrived at the right man. Chosen one, let yourself see what this makes possible for you. See the season where the people around you are all people who chose to be there after seeing the full cost. Not one person in your life who is standing near you under false pretenses. Not one arrangement that only works because somebody has not yet been told the truth about what it requires. See what your calling looks like when it is finally being built by people who can carry it. See how much faster things move when you are no longer compensating for someone in a seat they cannot fill. See the meetings that end early because everybody in the room is actually equipped. And see yourself at the gate, in daylight, not hiding a single term. That is the posture of a person who has stopped being afraid of losing things because they have watched heaven clear a path by simply telling the truth in public. Chosen one, pause here for a moment before we continue. Let your breath go lower than it has been going. Notice that nothing in your life needs to be defended in this exact minute. Nothing needs to be decided in the next 4 seconds. You are not late. You are being handed the terms before you sign, which is the one courtesy the enemy never extends. Now I want to gather everything we have built tonight, because we are approaching the part of this message that I have been protecting since the first minute, and you need all of it in your hands before we get there. You know that the counterfeit is assembled from your own prayer, which is why precision is not proof of authorship. You know that hurry exists to prevent inquiry, which is why the clock attached to an offer tells you more than the offer does. You know that real peace expands your field of vision and counterfeit peace narrows it to a single subject, which is why you can read a decision in your own chest before you can defend it with words. You know that investigation asks whether a thing is true and inquiry asks whether a thing is yours, and that no amount of the first will ever produce the second. You know there is a third door, and that a not yet is not a rejection but an assignment with a delay attached. And you know that anything taken early has to be held up forever. That is a complete system. If you never hear another word from me, you can run your life on those 6 things, and you will be harder to deceive than 90% of the sincere people you know. But there is one more thing, and it is not a technique. It is the reason all of this is happening to you right now, in this specific season, and when I tell you, a great deal of the last 2 years is going to reorganize itself in front of you. Chosen one, before I tell you, I want to give you one more distinction, because the language we have inherited has collapsed 2 very different things into one word, and the collapse has hurt a lot of people. In the older Greek of the sacred writings, there are 2 separate words that both get translated into English as testing. The first is peirazo. It means to test something in order to find its breaking point, to probe for weakness with the intention of exploiting it. When that word is used, the one doing the testing wants the thing to fail and is looking for the exact place where it will. The second is dokimazo. It means to test something in order to approve it. It is the word used for assaying precious metal, for determining whether coinage is genuine, for examining something so that it can be certified and then put into circulation. When that word is used, the one doing the testing wants the thing to pass, and the testing exists so that the value can be publicly established. 2 different words, 2 opposite intentions, 1 English word covering both. And chosen one, this is why so many sincere people cannot tell the difference between an attack and a promotion. You were handed 1 word for 2 opposite experiences, and so every difficult season feels identical from the inside. And you have spent years asking the wrong question. You keep asking whether this is God or the enemy, when the more useful question is, which kind of testing is this? Because both are usually happening in the same week, and they are aimed at completely different outcomes. The snare in front of you is peirazo. It is looking for the exact seam where you break. The season around it is dokimazo. It is establishing, in public, in front of witnesses you cannot see, what you are actually made of. Same pressure, opposite purposes. And the reason it matters practically is this: you do not have to resolve which one is which in order to respond, because the correct response to both is identical. Do not move until you have heard. That single posture defeats a probe and satisfies an assay at the same time. Now, chosen one, here is the thing I have been holding since the beginning of this message. You have been assuming that this trap exists because something wants to take from you. That is not why it is there. A snare is a very expensive object. It costs planning, materials, study of the target, patience, and precise placement. Nobody expends that on speculation. Nobody sets a trap in an empty field, and nobody sets one for a creature that has nothing worth taking. But there is a detail more specific than that, and it is the whole reveal. A snare is only ever placed at the last narrow point before the destination, not at the beginning of a journey, not in the middle of open country. Hunters have always understood this. You place the trap at the gap in the hedge, at the crossing point, at the narrow place where the path funnels, immediately before the animal reaches what it was traveling toward. Which means the appearance of this thing in your life, right now, after all these years, is not evidence that you took a wrong turn. It is evidence that you are at the gap in the hedge. Chosen one, sit inside that for a moment before you move. Everything you have been reading as opposition for the last 2 years has been positional information. The intensity did not increase because you drifted. It increased because you closed distance. The reason nothing like this was happening to you 5 years ago is not that you were more protected then. It is that 5 years ago you were nowhere near the crossing. Something has been watching your trajectory very carefully and calculating, and it does not spend resources on distant threats. The escalation in your life is a measurement. Read it as one. And there is a second half to this reveal, and it is the tender part. Why now? Why did heaven let you see it tonight instead of 2 years ago when you first started walking into things like this? Because 2 years ago you would have used this information to become afraid. You would have taken everything I said tonight and built a smaller life with it. You would have called it discernment and it would have been hiding. You are being told now because you have finally become the kind of person who can hold a warning without shrinking from it. That is not a small thing. That is a maturity that cannot be taught, only survived into. Chosen one, heaven does not show a person the trap until the person is strong enough to keep walking after seeing it. So hear the thesis of this entire message again, now that you have everything necessary to understand what it actually means. You are not being trapped, you are being set apart, and the moment you can tell the counterfeit from the calling, no open door can ever cost you again. This is not a setup against you. This is heaven setting you apart. The setup is real. Everything you sensed was accurate, but the direction of it has been inverted the whole time. What was set against you at the crossing is the last thing standing between you and what has been waiting on the other side of it, and its presence is the most reliable evidence of arrival you have received in years. You have been grieving a warning that was actually a location. And there is something being said over you right now, and I want to hand it to you in the words it is being spoken in. Heaven is saying, I did not bring you this far to lose you at the gap. I have watched every year you spent unseen and I recorded all of it. What is in front of you is not the reward. It is the last question before the reward, and I placed the answer inside you long before the question arrived. You have been asking me to remove the pressure. I have been building the person who can walk through it without being taken. Do not move until you hear me. And when you hear me, do not hesitate, because the same voice that is telling you to wait tonight will tell you to run when it is time. That is what is being said over your life tonight, chosen one. Let it settle somewhere below your thinking. Now let me bring this all the way down to the ground, because in about 10 minutes, you are going to close this message and walk back into an ordinary evening with a decision still sitting in front of you. Here is what I want you to do this week, in order, and none of it is difficult. Do nothing tonight, nothing. Whatever it is, it survives until morning, and if it genuinely does not survive until morning, then you have already learned everything you need to know about it. Tomorrow, write it down in plain language, with no spiritual vocabulary anywhere near it. Facts only. Read it out loud to an empty room and listen to your own voice. Then give it 3 days of still air. During those 3 days, do not gather more information. That is the mistake everybody makes. More data does not resolve an inquiry question. It only postpones it while looking productive. On the third day, bring one unafraid witness. Ask them one question. Does this look like me? And through all of it, keep watching your body. Field widening or field narrowing. Breath dropping or breath rising. That reading is running constantly whether you consult it or not. And for the chosen one, who felt something move when the mind was mentioned earlier, when we talked about what happened to the instrument, that door is still open in the description below. It is a small step, but small steps taken from a clear mind have changed the direction of entire seasons, and clarity is the one resource this whole message depends on. Chosen one, I want to show you one more thing about the gap in the hedge, because there is a question forming in some of you that deserves an answer. If the crossing point is where the danger is, then why does heaven let you walk to the crossing at all? Why not route you around it entirely? Because there is no other road to the destination. That is the plain answer. The narrow place is narrow because it is the way through, and a path that avoided every crossing would also avoid every arrival. But there is a second answer underneath that one, and it is the one that will change how you carry this for the rest of your life. Everything you are about to receive requires you to be someone who cannot be bought with a preview of it. That is not a moral requirement, it is a structural one. Consider what happens if a person is handed a large thing while still carrying the disposition that would trade it for a bowl. The thing does not bless them. It exposes them, and usually publicly, and usually in front of the people they were supposed to lead. You have watched this happen. Everybody has. Somebody receives the very thing they were praying for, and within 18 months, it has produced a version of them that nobody recognizes. And the world calls that money changing people or power corrupting people. It is neither. It is a delivery that arrived before the recipient could hold it. So the crossing is not an obstacle between you and the inheritance. The crossing is the last piece of the inheritance being installed in you. Chosen one. That is why the question in front of you this week is genuinely a question and not a formality. Heaven is not testing whether you are good. It is establishing whether you are unbuyable, and it is establishing it with you as the primary witness, because you are the one who will need to remember this the next time something beautiful and wrong is placed in front of you. You are not being examined by a suspicious God. You are being certified by a thorough one. And once a metal has been assayed, it does not get assayed again at every transaction. It circulates. That is the whole point of the process. There is a version of your life on the other side of this, where you are simply trusted with things, quickly, repeatedly, without the long interrogation, because the question has already been answered. I think that is what most of you are actually asking for when you ask God to move faster. You are not asking for speed, you are asking to stop being examined. And the only road to that is through one clean answer at one narrow place, which is precisely where you are standing tonight. Let me also say something to the part of you that is tired of being strong. Everything in this message has asked something of you. Wait, inquire, do not move, hold still while the pressure builds. And I know there is a place in you that heard all of that and thought, I do not have another round of endurance in me. Chosen one, hear this. Waiting is not endurance. Those are two different postures, and the confusion between them is what has been exhausting you. Endurance is holding a weight. Waiting is putting one down. You have been waiting the hard way, which is not waiting at all. It is standing in front of the door with your shoulder against it, straining, refusing to leave your post, treating your own vigilance as the thing that keeps the promise alive. The promise does not need your vigilance. It is not being held in place by your worry. Nothing that is genuinely appointed for you has ever depended on you watching it. So put your shoulder down, sit at the gate instead of pushing on it. The one who owns the timing has never once forgotten a name, and he has certainly not forgotten a person who has waited this long and stayed this kind about it. Now let me speak to the people who are listening to this and know, with complete certainty, that they have already walked into it. Some of you are not deciding tonight. Some of you decided in March or 3 years ago. And you have been sitting here for the last stretch of this message with a growing weight in your chest as every signature I described lined up with something you are already inside of. Chosen one, I want to say this to you as directly as I can. The presence of a snare in your history has never once cancelled the promise over your life, not in a single story ever recorded. Jacob was deceived at his own wedding, and the 12 tribes still came. Joshua signed a treaty with liars, and the sun still stood still for him. Peter denied the one he loved most, out loud, 3 times, in public, on the worst possible night, and was standing up preaching 7 weeks later. There is no story in the entire library where a person was disqualified for being deceived. There are only stories where people were disqualified by refusing to be told. And you are being told, right now, which is the loudest evidence available that you are not disqualified. So if you are in it, here is your instruction, and it is different from the one I gave to the people who are still deciding. Do not tear it down tonight either. Panic dismantling is just hurry pointed in the opposite direction, and it produces the same wreckage. Start with disclosure instead. Say one true sentence out loud to one safe person this week. That is the whole first step. Every exit from every counterfeit in history has begun with somebody stopping the performance for 30 seconds. The room you are in has a door. You did not notice it because you stopped looking for windows. It is still there. Chosen one, if you are one of those people and you just felt something loosen in your chest when I said that, I want you to claim it out loud before the feeling passes. Write the words, "There is a door," in the comments below. Not as a wish, as a claim. Because something happens in a person when they stop describing their situation as permanent, and the fastest way to stop describing it that way is to write a different sentence with your own hands. And I want you to notice that I have not asked you to do anything difficult tonight. I have not asked you to make a decision, leave anything, confront anybody, or repair a single thing. Every instruction in this message has been the same instruction wearing different clothes. Slow down long enough to be told. That is all discernment has ever been, not intelligence, not spiritual seniority, not a special gift given to a few people at birth. Simply the willingness to stay in the room long enough to hear something you did not already decide. The people who get caught are almost never the people who cannot hear. They are the people who did not stay. And you have stayed tonight for a long time through a message that has asked you to look at some difficult things about your own history without letting you off easily anywhere. That is not a small thing, chosen one, and I do not want it to pass unmarked. The instrument you are worried about is already working better than you think, because a dull instrument would have found this message uncomfortable in the first 10 minutes and gone looking for something warmer. You stayed because something in you recognized the frequency of the truth. That recognition is the very faculty you have been mourning as lost. It is not lost, it is quiet, and it is undernourished, and it has been shouted over for 20 years by an environment engineered to keep it that way. But it is not lost, and it responded tonight, which is how you know. Chosen one, as we move into this final unfolding of the message, let your spirit recognize the size of what heaven has actually been doing in you, because we have been talking about one decision and the real subject has always been larger than that. There is a line in the Proverbs that has followed me my whole adult life. There is a way that seems right to a person, and the end of it is death. Notice the construction of that sentence. It does not say there is a way that is evil. It does not say there is a way that looks dangerous. It says there is a way that seems right, and the entire warning lives inside the word seems. That verse is not about wicked people. Wicked people do not need a way that seems right. That verse was written for the sincere, for the devoted, for the person who is actively trying to do the correct thing and has only their own perception with which to identify it. And the remedy the same collection of writings gives is not more effort. It is a different sensory channel. Your ears will hear a word behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it," whenever you turn to the right hand or to the left. Behind you, chosen one, not in front of you. The guidance in that image does not arrive in the field of vision. It arrives from a direction you cannot see, which means it can only ever be received by a person who has learned to stop and listen rather than look. Now, I want to widen this out because there is a dimension to your situation that I have deliberately held back until now. This is not only about you. Look backward through your family for a moment, not sentimentally, structurally. Look for the pattern. In most families, there is one, and it repeats with a consistency that would be almost funny if it were not so expensive. In some families, the pattern is that money arrives and then something happens. Every generation gets close and something takes it. In some families, the pattern is that the gifted one gets pulled off course in their late 20s by a person or an opportunity. In some families, it is that nobody finishes. In some, it is that everybody works twice as hard for half as much, and nobody can explain why. Chosen one, those are not curses in the superstitious sense. I am not going to hand you that. Those are inherited decisions. A pattern of substitution, accepted by one generation, becomes the normal shape of life for the next one, because children do not learn discernment from lectures. They learn it by watching which offers the adults around them accepted, which means the thing in front of you this week is not a personal decision, it is a lineage decision. If you accept a counterfeit, you are not only paying for it, you are teaching it. You are demonstrating to everybody who is watching you what a person in your family does when something good and wrong shows up at a moment of exhaustion. And if you refuse it, you are not only protecting yourself, you are installing something. You are becoming the first person in your line who looked at a plausible thing and said, I am going to find out first. That is what a cycle breaker actually is. Not somebody with unusual power, somebody who introduced one new behavior into a repeating system and did it while tired and did it without applause. I want to tell you about a woman I heard of some years ago. I do not know her name and I will not pretend to. She came from a family that had a word for what happened to them. They called it the family luck, and they said it with a kind of grim humor at holidays. Every single person in 3 generations had gotten close to something and lost it in the final stretch. Her father had given 22 years to a company and was let go 11 days after a promotion. Her grandmother had lost a house in a way nobody could ever fully explain to the children, and she was on the same track. Twice she had gotten within reach of something and watched it dissolve, and both times, when she looked back honestly, she could identify the exact moment she had said yes to something she knew was slightly wrong because she was afraid it was the only chance she would get. The third time, she did something different. She did nothing for 4 days. She wrote the situation down in plain language. She read it out loud in her kitchen and heard herself using words she would not have accepted from anybody else. And then she said no to something that everybody in her life told her she was insane to refuse. 9 months of nothing followed, 9 months. And then something came that was not larger in the beginning. It was simply hers. And 4 years later, she was the first person in her family line who had ever built something that was still standing at the end of a decade. The part of her story that has stayed with me is not the outcome. It is what she said about the 9 months. She said, "That was the first time in my life I found out that nothing bad happens when you wait. Chosen one, that is the discovery on the other side of tonight. Not that you finally got the thing, that the catastrophe you have been avoiding your whole life, the one that supposedly happens if you hesitate, does not exist. It has never existed. It is the single most effective piece of fiction ever run on a faithful person." Now let me put the whole horizon in front of you, and then we will bring this into land. Picture 2 years from now, not a fantasy version, a specific ordinary Tuesday. See the work you are doing. Notice that it is the same work you were doing 6 months from now, which is to say that you finished something. See what compounding actually looks like when nothing reset it. See the quiet competence that only exists in people who stayed in one place long enough to get good. See your finances on that Tuesday, not a windfall. See the absence of a specific sound, the sound your stomach used to make when a certain kind of envelope arrived. See what it is like to make a decision about money from a position rather than from a shortage, because for the first time in your adult life, nothing in your budget is servicing an old substitution. See the people at your table. See how few of them there are, and how much you trust every one of them. See that nobody there requires management. See that you can say a difficult true sentence in that room and the room can hold it. And see yourself. See the way you handle an offer now. Somebody puts something in front of you and you feel nothing spike. You feel interest, and then a kind of calm curiosity. And you hear yourself say the sentence that used to be impossible for you. Let me sit with it for a few days. Chosen one, that sentence is the whole inheritance in miniature. Everything else follows from a person who can say it without fear. And look who is watching you say it. Somebody younger, somebody in your family or near it who has been quietly studying how you handle pressure, the same way you studied the adults around you. They are learning, in that moment, that a person can want something badly and still not grab it. You will never fully know what that cost you or what it saved them. That is what is actually being protected tonight. Not your comfort, not even your opportunity. The pattern that leaves your house. Now, chosen one, I know exactly what some of you are thinking at this point, because I have heard it from the most thoughtful people I know, and it deserves an answer rather than a dismissal. Some of you are thinking, I have heard messages like this before. I have felt this exact feeling before, sitting in a room, certain that something had shifted, and then Tuesday came, and nothing was different, and I was the same person, with the same problem, and slightly more disappointment. I want to honor that. That experience is real, and it is one of the most corrosive things that happens to sincere people, because after enough of it, a person stops letting anything land, out of self-protection. So let me tell you the difference between an experience and an instruction, because that is where the failure was. An experience is something that happens to you in a room. It has a peak, and it fades, and the fading is not a betrayal, it is simply the nature of feeling. If all you received tonight was a feeling, then yes, Tuesday will take it. An instruction is different. An instruction survives the fading because it does not depend on the emotional state that delivered it. Do nothing tonight. Write it in plain language. 3 days of still air. 1 unafraid witness. Watch the field and the breath. None of those 5 things require you to still feel the way you feel right now. You could execute all of them in a bad mood. That is the entire point, and it is why I have spent this whole message handing you procedures instead of atmosphere. Chosen one, if you do only the 3-day rule and nothing else from tonight, this message will have changed the shape of your next 10 years. There is a second objection, and it comes from a different kind of person, and I respect it even more. Some of you are thinking, I have already tried to develop discernment. I have prayed about it for years. I have asked God for wisdom repeatedly and specifically, and I am still the person who gets it wrong. Hear me. That is not a failure of your praying. Read what the request for wisdom actually promises. It says it will be given generously and without reproach. Without reproach, chosen one, which means the giver is not annoyed with you for still needing it. But notice also that nothing in that promise says the wisdom will arrive as an announcement. Wisdom that arrives as capacity feels like nothing at all when it is given. It only becomes visible in the moment of decision, months later, when you notice you did not do the thing you always do. You may have already received a great deal more than you think. Tonight may not be the day you get something. It may be the day you find out you already have it. And there is a third one, and this is the one that sits deepest, and it does not usually get said out loud. Some of you are thinking, what if the reason all of this keeps happening to me is that there is something wrong with me at the root, not my discernment, me? Chosen one, I want to answer that carefully. Everything I have described tonight would be far less painful if you did not care. The reason a substitution costs you so much is that you invest completely. The reason you get hurt is that you show up honestly. The reason you miss the seam is that you are not looking for one, because it does not occur to you to look for seams in people because you do not build them. The very qualities that made you catchable are the ones that make you worth catching. There is nothing at the root of you that needs to be replaced. There is a faculty that needs to be sharpened and a habit of speed that needs to be interrupted. Those are maintenance items. They are not identity. Do not let anybody, including yourself at 3 in the morning, convert a skill gap into a verdict about your worth. Now let me give you one last picture, and it is the one I want you to carry out of here. Imagine a ship coming in after a very long crossing. Weeks at sea. The crew is exhausted, low on water, and every person on board can smell land before they can see it. And a harbor appears. Sheltered, calm, beautiful. Everything in every person on that deck wants to turn the wheel toward it, and there is not one unreasonable impulse anywhere in that desire. But the captain does not turn, and the crew cannot understand it, because from the deck, that harbor is indistinguishable from home. The captain does not turn because he is reading something the crew cannot read. The chart says that below the surface of that particular harbor, in the calmest and most inviting water on this entire coastline, there is a shelf of rock, about 4 feet under the waterline, that has opened the hull of every vessel that ever trusted the view. Chosen one, the crew is not wrong about what they see. The water genuinely is calm. The harbor genuinely is beautiful. Their eyes are working perfectly. They simply do not have the chart. And that is the entire difference between the person who arrives and the person who is salvaged. Not courage, not desire, not even faith if we are honest. Access to information that is not visible from the deck. You have been sailing for a long time. You have earned the right to want a harbor. Nobody listening to this should feel ashamed of how badly they want to stop. But tonight, you were handed the chart. And now, you know that calm water on this coast is not evidence of safety, and you know how to read the seam, and you know the difference between a harbor and a shelf, and you know that home is further along a coastline you cannot see the end of yet. Keep the wheel steady. The real harbor does not have rocks under it, and it is not as far as it feels tonight. And there is something heaven once said over you before we close, and I am going to say it the way it is being given. I have not been slow with you. I have been thorough. Every year you thought was empty, I was removing something from you that would have broken under the weight of what I am about to hand you. You have asked me 100 times why other people receive faster. They received something smaller. I am not comparing you to them, and neither should you. What is prepared for you requires a person who can be told no by the one who loves them and stay. And tonight you were told no, and you stayed, and that is the last thing I needed to see. Chosen one, let that rest on you for a moment. Do not rush past it to the practical part. There will be time for the practical part. Somebody needed to hear that they were not being punished with slowness. Somebody needed to hear that the empty years were subtraction and not neglect. And here is the last piece of instruction before we close this out. When the answer finally comes, and it will, it is going to require the opposite of everything I have taught you tonight. It is going to require speed. The same voice that is saying do not move right now is going to say go, and it will not repeat itself several times, and it will not build a case. That is why the discipline of stillness matters so much. It is not because God prefers slow people. It is because only a person who has learned to wait on a voice can move instantly when the voice changes. A person who moves on their own impulses cannot be redirected quickly because they are already committed to something. Stillness is not the destination, chosen one. Stillness is what makes you fast. Chosen one, we are going to close this now, and I do not want you to leave with only understanding. Understanding evaporates. I want something anchored in you before you stand up. But before we anchor it, I want to stop and simply notice something with you, because we have covered a great deal of hard ground tonight, and it would be a shame to walk out of here without acknowledging what is already true. You are still here, after everything, after the years that did not work, after the decision that cost you, after the season when the people you counted on went quiet, and the one where you had to rebuild something you had already built once. After all of it, you are sitting here at the end of a long message about protection, and you are still the kind of person who stays for the whole thing. Chosen one, that is not nothing. There are people who are far more talented than you who did not make it this far with their hope intact. Something has been keeping you, and it was not your strategy, because your strategy failed several times, and you are still standing. Let that be acknowledged before we go any further. Not celebrated loudly, just acknowledged, the way you would acknowledge someone who walked a long way to get to a room. And now, I want you to set something down. There is a specific weight you have been carrying into every decision for years, and it is not the decision itself. It is the verdict you attach to yourself the last time you got one wrong. You know exactly which one I mean. It has a date, it has a room, it probably has a person in it. And ever since, in every subsequent choice, that verdict has been sitting in the chair next to you, whispering that you are the kind of person who does not see things coming. Picture that verdict as an object for a moment. Give it a weight and a shape. Some of you are seeing something like a stone. Some of you are seeing paper, a document, a signature. Now do this. Do not throw it. Do not fight it. Simply open your hand and let it go to the floor. Release the verdict that you are gullible. Release the belief that your softness is the reason you were hurt. Release the sentence that says you should have known because you could not have known. And being unable to see through an engineered forgery is not a moral failing, and you have been serving a sentence for a crime that was never committed. Release the years, not the lesson, the years. Chosen one, breathe once now, and notice that your hands are lighter than they were 4 minutes ago. That is not imagination. That is what happens in a body when a person stops holding a case against themselves. Now let me give you the whole night in 6 sentences, so that you can carry it out of here without notes. The counterfeit is built from your own prayer, so precision proves nothing about the source. Hurry exists to prevent inquiry, so the clock attached to an offer tells you more than the offer does. Real peace expands your field and counterfeit peace narrows it, so read your breath and your line of sight before you read the contract. Investigation asks whether a thing is true, and inquiry asks whether a thing is yours, and no amount of the first will ever produce the second. There is always a third door, and a not yet is an assignment with a delay attached, not a rejection. And anything taken early must be held up forever, while anything given rests on you without effort. 6 sentences, chosen one. If you forget everything else I said tonight, those 6 will keep you from almost every trap that has ever been set for a sincere person. And there is one more thing, which is not a technique but a posture, and it is the umbrella over all 6. Never make a permanent decision from a temporary state, not from exhaustion, not from loneliness, not from the specific desperation that arrives on the last week of a month when the numbers do not work, not from the high of a room that finally applauded you. Every trap I have ever walked into was entered from a temporary state that I mistook for the ordinary condition of my life. And every one of those states passed within days of the decision that they produced. Wait for neutral. That is the whole discipline. Wait until you are neither desperate nor elated, and then decide, and you will find that most of the decisions that terrified you resolve themselves quietly the moment they are made by a person who is standing on level ground. So I am going to ask you to do something with me, and it will take about 3 minutes, and it is the most important 3 minutes of tonight. Wherever you are, let your eyes close if that is safe for you to do. If it is not, let them soften and rest on one point that is not moving. Let your hands come open, palms up, resting wherever they are. Take one breath and let it go lower than your chest. Not a big dramatic breath, just one that arrives underneath the place where you have been holding everything. Now I want you to see a road. It is your road, and it is the one you have been walking for the last several years. See it as it actually has been. See the stretch that went on longer than anybody warned you about. See the place where it climbed. See the section where you walked at night without any evidence that the road was going anywhere at all. And now see, up ahead of you, a narrow place, a gap in a hedge, 2 walls of green coming close together and the path funneling between them, and beyond that gap, light on open ground. See the thing that has been set in the gap. You know what it is. You have known since the first 10 minutes of this message. Do not name it out loud. Simply see it sitting there in the narrow place. And now, watch yourself do something you have never done at this point in the road before. You stop. You do not turn around. You do not run at it. You do not close your eyes and hope. You simply stop, 4 steps short, and you stand there. and you look at it properly for the first time in your life. And as you stand there, notice what happens to the fear. Notice that it does not increase. Notice that a thing you are looking at directly has less power than a thing you were hurrying past. That is not a spiritual principle. That is simply how it works. And every person who has ever stopped has discovered the same thing. Now hear the reframe, and let it land where the fear was. That object in the gap is not proof that you are cursed. It is proof of your address. It is the last thing between you and open ground, and it was placed there by someone who has been watching your progress with alarm, and its presence tonight means you are closer than you have been in your entire adult life. You are not standing in danger. You are standing at the threshold. And now the last part, and I want you to actually do this with your hand. Place your hand on your heart. Feel it there. Feel the steadiness underneath your palm. The thing that has been running without your supervision every second of every one of those difficult years, including the nights you were certain you would not make it through. That rhythm did not stop when you were deceived. It did not stop when you were humiliated. It did not stop during the season nobody called. It has been the most faithful thing in your life, and you have never once thanked it. Let your hand stay there. Let your shoulders come down. Let the breath go low again. And feel this. Under your hand is the instrument, not a metaphor. The reading you have been trying to develop all night happens in this exact place, and it is still working, chosen one. It has been sending you signals for months. Tonight is simply the first night you agreed to receive them. Now, with your hand still where it is, I want you to declare this with me. Out loud if you can, quietly if you cannot, and mean every word of it. I am not desperate. I am appointed. I am not late. I am being prepared. I am not being denied. I am being defended. I am not the person who takes what is in front of me. I am the person who receives what is prepared for me. I can wait, because what is mine cannot be given to anybody else. And I am no longer available to anything that requires me to hurry. Chosen one, feel the weight of what you just declared, because that was not a positive affirmation, and I would not waste the end of a message like this on one. Here is why declaration works, and I want you to understand the mechanism rather than just perform the ritual. A human being does not act out of what they believe. A human being acts out of what they have most recently rehearsed. That is why the enemy of your life invests so heavily in repetition and so little in argument. It has never needed you to be convinced of anything. It has only needed you to rehearse a sentence often enough that it becomes the thing your mouth reaches for under pressure. You have been rehearsing sentences for years. This is my only chance. Nothing ever works out for me. If I do not take it now, nothing is coming. Those were not beliefs. They were rehearsals, and they were installed by repetition, and they have been running your decisions from underneath. What you just did was interrupt a rehearsal and replace it. Once is not enough, but once is where every replacement in history has started, and you were made in the likeness of a God whose words are not descriptions of reality, but instruments that shape it. So say them again this week, in the car, in the shower, on the third day, when the pressure comes back, because it will come back on the third day. It almost always does. And chosen one, before we seal this, do one thing for me. Come back and tell me what happened. Not tonight. In a week or two, when the decision has resolved and you know how the story went, come back to this message and leave the ending in the comments, because somebody is going to arrive here in 6 months in exactly the situation you are in tonight, and they are going to scroll down, looking for evidence that a person like them can actually stop at the gap and survive it. Your sentence might be the thing that keeps them from signing. Now let me bless you before you go. Chosen one, I bless your discernment, and I bless the quiet that it needs in order to speak. I bless your patience in the exact places where patience has cost you the most. I bless your capacity to say, let me sit with it, out loud, in front of people who are in a hurry. I bless your eyes to see the seam, and your body to read what your mind has not caught up to yet. I bless your no, and I bless the peace that will follow it. And I bless the yes that is coming to you, and the strength you will have on that day to move without hesitating, because you will recognize the voice. having learned it in the season when it was telling you to wait. Go slowly, go clear, go unhurried. You are not being trapped, chosen one. You are being set apart, and whatever waits for you on the other side of this narrow place has been prepared with a care you will not fully understand until you are standing in it. The road is still yours. The gap is not the end of it, and you are not walking it alone tonight, and you never have been. It is sealed,